Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 185. That's PEP or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC News, or anytime you like on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook, where you'll also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb, and you can leave a comment under those videos where we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us at PEPCHASDRDAVE. That's at PepChasDrDave. If you want to chat to some fellow peppers, you can join our Discord server. It's on the screen right now or in the blurb of the podcast. If you want to contact me or Lockie the Lackey privately, why not email us? The address is producer@pepthepodcast.com. The address again is producer@pepthepodcast.com. And if you want to buy merch, that address is www.pepchazdaveshop.com. PepChazDaveShop.com. Perfect for Christmas. But for now, let's hear from the lady who refuses to even raise the stakes on inconsequential views in New Orleans. It is journalist Elle Hardy. Hello, Elle.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for sticking through that introduction. It's getting ridiculously long. In fact, our introduction is now longer than most podcasts. But thank God the podcast itself is so incredibly long, it doesn't matter. What's going on in Elle world at the moment?
What is happening in our world? I'm recently back from a tour of US presidential libraries, researching my new book. US presidential libraries are amazing. They have really great archives, and their museums. You know, I got to go on Air Force One and all that kind of stuff. And in New Orleans, Taylor Swift has just touched down for her tour, so the city is aflame. And our wonderful Governor Jeff Landry, who I've mentioned on the show before, used the Department of Wildlife to move a homeless encampment away from where Taylor's concert is. So, as I've mentioned before, I think he's going to be the new Ron DeSantis. So just keep an eye on this guy.
Is that the kind of can-do action that Ron DeSantis would be jealous of, moving homeless people away from Taylor Swift?
Yes, and using the Department of Wildlife to do it, which was a particularly Landry-esque touch. So, like I said, I think after this election, we're going to be seeing a lot more of him on the national stage.
I suspect you might be a weekly guest, Elle, come 2027.
Louisiana Corner.
Yes, I'll get the sting made right now. For everyone's information at home, we are recording this, believe it or not, at 12:50 a.m. Sydney time on a Saturday morning. Elle, what's the time in New Orleans right now?
It is 8:50 a.m. on Friday morning.
Okay, I have no idea how long this is going to go, and that's always going to fill the listener and especially Elle with dread, because I've been preparing this one for ages. I didn't finish, I never finish, but I've just got all this stuff for an Unleashed, and I got no idea how long this is going to last. The Unleashed might go longer than the actual podcast. I just figure we've only got a week left till our final podcast before the election. There's a lot of stuff we want to squeeze in. At least I want to squeeze in, because there's something wrong with me, Elle. So bear with me. But before we get into the content, let's talk about what you're grateful for. What are you grateful for, Elle?
All right. So right before recording, my partner came steaming into the room saying saying Australia needs to know about this. So last night in the States, there was a third-party debate. So Jill Stein and Cornel West and all those guys. And it was opened with a delightful rendition of the national anthem that I think may go into the pantheon of Carl Lewis at the NBA, Roseanne Barr, and I think even earlier this year there was a country music singer at an All-Star baseball game who checked into rehab the next day after butchering the national anthem, and I think we have a new entrant into this Hall of Fame.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. fucked it up. I fucked it up. Can I go back? Can I go back, please? Bombs bursting, and then I got too nervous. Gave proof through the night that our flag was still there.
Oh dear! And then it went on without incident for the rest. I think people were a bit confused at the beginning there, going, "This sounds all right," but then we got to the to the best bit. Do you think there was meant to be a backing track as well?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, maybe in the production, I don't know. It just sort of fits so perfectly into the third party candidate world.
Yeah.
There was one of the candidates. I can't remember if he wound up being the nominee. At the Libertarian conference earlier this year, like took an edible before he went on stage to do his speech.
Right. That's right.
And it's just, there is something to, there's so much money and production that goes into American politics. And then these kind of delightfully disastrous third-party candidates just always manage to have those moments. So it just felt fitting.
Yeah, the anthem got Jill Steined. I'm grateful for that one as well. I'll tell you what I'm also grateful for. I'm grateful to Morgan, who wrote us a lovely handwritten letter. Who writes with their hand these days? I don't think I could. To be honest, I'll be honest, Morgan's handwriting was really neat, but I could barely read it because it's been so long since I read handwriting. I've just lost the eye muscles to read handwriting. I was like, trying to go back to year 3, trying to figure it out. But thank you, Morgan. To quote Liz Fair, I want all the stupid old shit like letters and sodas, and I certainly have plenty of sodas. So it was kind of you to provide the letters, and that's a real 1% reference. But those who know what I'm referring to will love it. Mwah. But I want to get straight into the content now, El, because like I said, I have no idea how long this is going to be. And to be honest, there wasn't as much abuse about the correspondence in the correspondence this week as there usually is, which I enjoy playing the abuse, reliving it, relishing it, if you will, rubbing it all over my face. There was a little bit of abuse tonight. I might come back to that, but from tonight's Planet America. But I'll skip past the correspondence for now. We'll see where I go in the Unleashed. God, it's going to be long. Let's get into the weekend campaign. And I want to start off by talking about polling. Now, I know I didn't warn you we were going to talk about polling, Elle, but what I want to talk about with polling is that I don't want to talk about polling. And the reason why is I feel like that polling is unusually useless in this election at this point in time. And I don't mean that the polls are doing a bad job or that they're wrong or there's a conspiracy. I don't mean any of that. What I mean is that it's hard to emphasize to you guys how much a likely voter filter affects a poll. For example, the TIPP poll in Pennsylvania a few weeks back had 116 out of 124 registered voters from Philadelphia saying that they were very or somewhat likely to vote. But those voters weren't college educated. They were non-white. They weren't old. Their voting history was not great. And so as a result, TIPP only counted 12 of them as likely voters, from 116 down to 12. And they, of course, would have largely been Democrats. That's obviously going to affect the result of the poll. And in this case, 538 gave this poll a terrible weighting. They only moved the polling average 0.1% towards Trump in this case because of all these concerns. But the thing is, I'm not trashing TIPP. There's a logic to that. There's a logic to how you determine likely voters. It's a bit of an art form, really, and everyone has their own formula. But the point is, whatever their formula is, it affects the result in a huge way because we're only listening to likely voters when it comes to polling at the moment. So every poll is making those voter assumptions, and it completely dominates the poll. The reason why I think this is such a big deal in this election is, number one, because it's so close. So tiny little changes in polling models make a huge difference to the result. But also, Trump this year, more than any other candidate that I can think of in history, is all about low propensity voters. The Cook report found that Harris is leading 51-47 amongst high engagement voters, but Trump is leading 52-45 amongst medium to low engagement voters. He was 10 points ahead of Biden in low engagement, then 3 ahead of Harris, and now 7 ahead of Harris. And it's partly because these people have always appealed to Trump, but also, Trump has always appealed to these people because he's a conspiracy theorist. But also, RFK supporters who go to Trump are also going to be low propensity voters. Why does that matter? Because all of these people who appeal to Trump are not likely voters. Literally none of them are going to turn up in a poll. So it's really hard to know how many of Trump's supporters who will vote are being excluded. Maybe there aren't many. Maybe there's heaps. We just have no idea. Also, likely voters may well be excluding Harris's ground game. We're going to get to the ground game later. She has a much stronger ground game than the Republicans have. Her team are knocking on more doors. They're dragging more people to the polls. They're making sure people who otherwise wouldn't vote are voting. Those people are probably going to be low propensity voters. And so they're not going to come through in the polls either. We're not going to know till election day how much of a difference these two factors make, the ground game versus Trump's attraction for low propensity voters. And so that makes polling, I think, really hard to pin down. It's not their fault. It's just, I think, a fool's game, in my view, in this election. So I'm just going to wait 2 weeks and find out. We can all wait. Bottom line, if you're interested, 538, Nate Silver, Cook Political Report, all of them have 7 states within half the margin of error. All of them, which to me means too close to call. And so I think there's no point discussing numbers really any further until after the election. What's your view on that?
No, I mean, that's just some premium PEP content right there. We're not going to talk about this and then, and then have a 10-minute discussion. Yeah, I mean, look, we'll get into it later, but, you know, if only there was some wealthy billionaire to induce some of these low propensity voters to the polls in swing states. But yeah, we'll get there.
We'll get to that as well. We gave old Elon a break last week, so it's time to get back into him. Now, let's talk about the campaign. Probably the moment of the week, I think, for many would have been involving Trump visiting McDonald's. I mean, it says a lot about this election campaign, and that could be the moment of the week of any election campaign. For those who may have just, talking about Elon, may have just come from Mars, what I'm referring to is that Trump has been obsessed with Kamala Harris, saying that she worked a summer job at McDonald's as a kid. Trump doesn't believe her. And so he proved that she was lying somehow by going to McDonald's and handing fries to some Republicans for 15 minutes. I don't understand how that works. That's not really how evidence works as far as I know. But he asserted a lot during that process that Kamala Harris never worked at McDonald's. So, for example,
I've now worked for 15 minutes more than Kamala.
Are you going to put this on your resume?
She never worked here.
Look, I don't know if that was convincing to anyone, but that was obviously the point of this. But, Elle, what did you think of the McDonald's visit as political theatre?
Well, I think the thing that interested me most was was him sort of confessing to probably doing Logan Act violations in a McDonald's drive-through, which is just a wonderful way that if the world's going to end in nuclear war, this may as well be how it starts. So yeah, he spoke about that he'd been on the phone with Bibi Netanyahu, and what did he say? Something, they've got some things planned or whatever. And obviously, the Logan Act, it's a violation for someone other than the president to be doing foreign policy, even though, it got Nixon elected. It almost got Reagan impeached. Yeah. But I mean, look, it's two of Trump's greatest moments in politics have come in to do with McDonald's, right? Remember his burger party for the Clemson football team? Yeah, just one of the greatest photos you'll ever see. When he during the budget shutdown, when he just got thousands of burgers into the White House for the football players. So I mean, it's just utterly absurd. And I mean, I don't know if there's very much to take from it, but I don't know, maybe does this stuff matter to a couple of hundred swing voters in Erie, Pennsylvania? I got no idea.
I got a few thoughts on this one. I must admit, my first impulse when I heard about this was that it was really lame. I mean, my first impulse was, well, this is a poor man's McHappy Day. And for Americans listening who have no idea what I'm talking about, in Australia, we have McHappy Day where celebrities work at McDonald's for a day for charity. And lots of politicians do it. Our current Prime Minister did it once, worked in McDonald's for an entire day and not just handed out fries to a couple of Republicans. Like, it actually worked in McDonald's behind the counter. That's the way we roll in Australia. We also had one of our previous prime ministers shitting himself at McDonald's. At least he was rumoured to. So as you can see, your political rumours haven't hit rock bottom. Australia is decades ahead of you as far as our political rumours go. Anyway, I thought it was lame. I also thought it was so transparent what he was trying to do with sledging Kamala Harris. I felt kind of insulted at how unsubtle it was. But I also thought it was kind of odd how excited right-wingers got on Twitter. They were like, I literally have never seen people online so enthused about anything, like any meme or anything. They were a little bit like Scott Morrison McDonald's. They were going crazy. And that was the said Prime Minister. But then a few things changed my mind. Like I was a bit contemptuous for a while there. But then, first of all, I noticed that the lengths that segments of the media and the left went to dunk on it, which suggested to me that they felt like it left a mark. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so keen to undermine it. Like people were fixated on proving that this photo op was a fake. like, of course it was a fake. How could you expect a guy who'd just been shot at to be serving randos in a McDonald's in a place where they have guns? I mean, just the whole thing obviously had to be staged. And that's not unusual either, is it? I mean, I should ask you as a journalist, the impression I get is that all photo ops are staged. Like Kamala Harris has had entire restaurants emptied and had the people replaced with approved people so she can go in there and mix with her flunkies for a photo op. That's just normal behavior, isn't it? Am I right?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a security thing. It's Secret Service. Yeah. You can't, they have to, I mean, campaigns will vet people because obviously, I mean, we all saw J.D. Vance in the donut shop when his people were woefully underprepared and, the person saying, I don't want to be on camera. So campaigns vet to have their guys there who aren't going to, hold up a Free Palestine sign or, ask anything silly. But I mean, just Secret Service. If you've got Trump standing there in a fixed box in an open window, I mean, that's, that'd be pretty easy. He's a pretty easy target and we've already seen a few things. So I think just for security. But on a serious note, I guess the thing that it really highlighted for me was that Trump is still really the master of earned media. The clips of that were just going around on social media. Kamala's had such a low target, turn the temperature down strategy. So you see tiny clips of her thing, but the TV news is playing 30 seconds to a minute of Trump just yakking it up in the drive-through box. And that is a really long time on TV news and you just don't get that. And I think it really chimes with the current kind of vibe, I guess, that I'm getting, but you're sort of noticing a lot of people in the US talking about, which is just that Trump just seems to be getting so much more media at the moment and relatively positive media, whereas Kamala kind of feels like she's walking through treacle. Everything feels a bit forced. I mean, we'll talk about her interviews this week. Her campaign has had such a heavy strategy of, Tim Walz really made a splash early on and he's just been shunted into the back cupboard. You don't really see him anymore. There's low authenticity, I guess, coming out of there. And meanwhile, Trump's out there doing Trump things and it feels like there's a lot more momentum with his campaign at the moment.
Yeah, look, he touched on a couple of things that I was thinking as well. Like you talk about the news coverage, how they got 30 seconds, which is a lot of time. I would challenge anyone to tell me what Kamala Harris did on the day that Trump visited McDonald's. she just got swallowed up entirely. And there are only like 17 days of campaigning left when that occurred. Each day is critical. And Trump just took an entire day for himself with this stunt. And yeah, like Kamala Harris might as well have taken the entire day off. It was wasted. And every single day that Trump does something like this, it's a large, like it's like 5% of the campaign chewed up. And Kamala Harris didn't have much of the campaign to begin with because she started later. So it's actually, just the swallowing up of airtime alone, I think is actually significant, I would say. You mentioned the authenticity. I think that's a really important point as well, which is the whole reason for this trip was to question Harris's authenticity, right? He's been questioning her authenticity from day one about whether she's pretending to be black, about whether she changes her accent at different occasions, about whether she's a puppet, about whether she has any real policies she hasn't reversed, about whether she's prepared to do real interviews, about whether she's always lying. He loves attacking people for not being authentic, for being a phony. And I think the reason for that is because authenticity is something that many Americans think Trump has. And Trump haters will be going, how can you say that? He's so obviously fake. The man has fake hair. He's wearing mud all over his face. There's nothing authentic about him. But yeah, like he's kind of upfront about his makeup and his hair and all that stuff. He might be ridiculous, but he's consistently ridiculous in a really open way. And when he turned up to this photo op, he kept wearing his stupid long tie and his shirt. He didn't cosplay as a working class person. He came as himself. And even if he didn't take strips off Harris, and I don't really think that succeeded, they're going, oh, Kamala Harris, she didn't work here. I don't think that works, but he certainly built his own reputation as being authentic at her expense because he was clearly loving it, to quote McDonald's. Like, the man, no one would pretend for a second that he doesn't genuinely love McDonald's.
He's a McDonald's a well-known McDonald's enthusiast, and I thought that the part as well, which it was getting so much media airtime, but also this stuff's really memeable. And I mean, we'll talk more about media, the role of conventional media later on. But I mean, this is the young vote is really up for grabs at the moment. Well, it's volatile, it's swinging, and this is the kind of stuff that gets played on TikTok, and it's funny, and people are sending me memes about it all week, and that's the stuff that cuts through. Whereas Kamala sitting down with Liz Cheney, no one's playing that on TikTok, right?
There's no Liz Cheney memes.
all little Liz Cheney heads out there, just but yeah, actually, a friend of mine commented, which is quite true. Just Trump's face when he found out that they're not allowed to touch the fries. And as a friend of mine said, it looks like this has been something that's been vexing him since the 1970s. But just the genuine enthusiasm of just like, it was Trump in a nutshell, right? His obvious contempt for the people that vote for him, yet his ability to chime with them. And it was just like, I don't want these disgusting people touching my fries, but I'm going to eat them anyway. It was just like the most perfect encapsulation of Trump. And that is what a meme is, right? It's catching a zeitgeist in like a little moment. And it seemed to me to be bizarrely effective, even if it wasn't entirely intentional.
I completely agree. I was going to bring that up myself, that was more authenticity. No one would doubt that he was genuinely knocked out by the fact that they don't touch the fries. He mentioned it like 5 times. He was obsessed with it. And we all know that he's a germaphobe. And so it makes sense. You go, oh, shit, he really was freaked out about people touching the fries. And he's genuinely enthusiastic about this. Like, which I think it goes some distance to making him seem more authentic again. And you mentioned the kids. I'd go further. I'd say that Trump's greatest skill is appealing to the entire working class, even though he himself is the opposite of the working class. As you say, he probably would have contempt for these people in real life if one of them showed up at one of his lunches or something. But And that's why it irritates the Democrats. They hate the fact that he seems to just chum along with the working class so well, because it just seems unfair and unjust. But the fact is that he enjoys the same things that the working class enjoy. Clearly, like McDonald's, like Fox News, like all the TV shows he likes. Like he shares the tastes of the working class, and that is something that bonds. He uses to bond with them, I think.
Yeah,
and I think,
well, so much of so much of America nowadays, I mean, everything is predicated on consumption, right? And when you see so much political movement and just community organization, it's around consumption. You know, when Bud Light had a trans influencer promote their beer, what mobilized people to boycott boycott Bud Light? You know, whereas, you know, people aren't necessarily organizing in their workplaces or around their churches and things like that. It's often around consumption. So it seems like a facile point, but like you said, showing that he has the same tastes and in terms of consumption as his voters obviously means something.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact is, he has from the beginning won over the white working class, and now he's winning over the non-white working class as well, especially non-white working class men. It can't be a coincidence. It can't be a fluke. There's got to be something behind it. So I'm not saying I'm sitting there with stars in my eyes going, oh, you're doing it so well, Trumpy. Like I said, I found the whole thing boring. But as like David Attenborough trying to study what's going on in politics and trying to work out how is he doing this, I think that is what's going on. I think he has a bond with at least a number of working class people. And this stunt, I think, played right into it because he clearly enjoys his McDonald's. He was genuinely good at fraternizing with the workers, even if he wouldn't be caught dead with them on some other occasion. At the time, when the camera's on, he's as good as Bill Clinton, I think, at seeming like he's enjoying the company of working class people. He seemed to have no problems with it whatsoever. The fact that he's extremely tacky and he acts like a poor person would think a rich person should act like, I think that helps as well, to be honest. I think it's all part of the act, you know, and he was having a good time, not pretending to have a good time. He was actually having fun, like the hands not touching the fries thing. He was enjoying that so much. I actually think I'll add to that. I saw a point from Daily Wire owner Jeremy Boring, which I thought actually was pretty salient. So I'll just read out the quote. I don't often quote Jeremy Boring from Daily Wire, but I'm going to this time. He said, sure, it's standard political hackery to get a I'm just like you photo op, like Tim Walz hunting, for instance. That's not what this is. The McDonald's troll was funny expressly because Trump is not an average American. It was self-aware in a way very few politicians are self-aware. And in that absurd and self-aware visual, a world-famous septuagenarian billionaire, former president, frying fast food, he makes the point that Kamala Harris isn't just like us either. It was Trump at his absolute best. Are some people making more of it than that? Is there a cultish element amongst some of his followers? Sure. He is uniquely loved and uniquely hated, but he's funny as hell, and this was a highly effective troll. I think he's right. I think it was self-aware, and I think it did play off the fact that he clearly did not belong there, and it did imply that Kamala Harris doesn't belong there either. By him looking ridiculous, I think it made her story of working at McDonald's seem more ridiculous, even though she may well have worked at McDonald's when she was 18. She wasn't part of the upper echelon when she was 18, but it just seems unlikely now because of this stupid image we're seeing of the dude with the long tie there with the apron on. It sort of reinforced, in my view, the class divide between Trump and Harris and the working class, but somehow Trump gets that immunity from his economic class all the time. What do you think of that theory?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just push back a little on that it's entirely working class. I mean, we've known that Trump from the beginning, you know, small business owners and it's very regional, a lot of his support base. And I think it really actually speaks to that really opening up of the culture gap, the gender gap and the education gap between the parties. So I think it's that very, I'm trying to think of a good word, but that the sort of the taste that, you know, people might say working class, but it's this kind of, you know, we're salt of the earth, real Americans. And it goes to push back against, Kamala Harris, who is a, highly educated San Francisco lawyer, just isn't going to yuck it up with people at a rural McDonald's. I think it is really, I've said before that Trump is just a television savant. He just, I guess, and this is a guy, what is it, that 10,000 hours thing? This guy has watched 10 million hours of television in his life. He just has an innate sense of what works and what plays well, and he actually, for a man who is, quite probably a narcissist, he does have an ability to send himself up and to be able to show that touch and be like, well, obviously I'm a billionaire, I'm never going to work at McDonald's. But going back to what we were talking about initially with the authenticity, he just has a way of making things chime that if Kamala's in that situation, it's, your cringe gland is going to be firing off because she just doesn't have that ability to do those things. And I mean, look, in fairness, she's probably not going to win over the people that think that's necessarily cool or whatever. And it's just not really her game. But Trump's just good at it. And, going into the last 2 weeks before the election, it's given him momentum. And you do feel like that he's the one, with the wind in his sails at the moment.
For the record, I actually think Kamala Harris is actually good at bonding with people. I've seen her do it a number of times, working class people as well. Probably, as you say, probably not a lot of McDonald's goers, but I've seen it happen a number of times. She just doesn't do it enough for mine. Maybe she hasn't had the time. But I don't think it's beyond her. I just don't think we associate it with her. I just don't think we do. Yeah. And as you say as well, the joy is very much gone in the Kamala Harris campaign. We'll be talking about that in a second, I expect, as well. They've kind of switched roles a little bit. The Kamala Harris campaign seems tense, to be honest, to me, whereas the Trump campaign seems to be enjoying themselves, and this is part of it. And that's the kind of vibe you want the week before the election, to be looking like you're having fun, I would have thought. Do you have anything else to say about this before we play political strategist and ask, what should Kamala Harris have done in this situation to counter that?
No, it's a perfect segue. Let's go.
Let's do that. Would you like to start off, or do you have any theories about what she could have done? Is there anything she could have done?
I mean, it really depends. When you were talking earlier about the polls, is just there's so much that we don't know, and often campaigns give tells about what they're seeing internally. It's it's often said that internal polling is far better, and they tend to give clues as to what they're seeing. And again, with seeing that it really feels like Trump has momentum, whereas what Kamala did this week looked so reactive.
Yeah.
I also think, kind of going into her NBC interview, she looks knackered. She looks, I think maybe it's the problem of being quite an attractive and visibly younger person that maybe, sort of I think if you looked at a photo from the start of the campaign and now, she looks weathered, but the whole point of the Democrats campaign, what they've done, they've made very explicit, after they really clamped down after Walz's weird comment really went big, they sort of said, okay, now the adults are in the room and we're not going to run with all of that stuff. And I feel like she's been so micromanaged that, they're not letting her do anything like that at McDonald's. But they're also very clearly going for the strategy of trying to win over suburban Republicans who are not fans of Trump, who are Nikki Haley's people. And obviously doesn't sound entirely unreasonable, but we all remember 2016, right? What was the Chuck Schumer quote? For every working class person that we lose, we gain, for every blue collar Democrat we lose in Western Pennsylvania, we pick up 2 moderate Republicans in the suburbs in Philadelphia. You can repeat that in Ohio, Illinois, and Wisconsin. And it really does feel like they're, as I said to you earlier this week, it sort of feels like they're a dangerous Donald away from completely rerunning the Hillary playbook from 2016. And there may be things that they're seeing. And certainly the Nikki Haley vote suggests that is a mine worth tapping into. Yeah. But again, how these people might say that they don't they don't like Trump, and they're disgusted about some things that he's saying and doing, or they might, there might be women concerned about abortion issues and things like that. But I think there still is, America has a very parochial culture, and it's like asking someone to switch football teams. They might really hate the coach. The star player might have done something that they don't like off the pitch, but at the end of the day, are they really going to go and support someone else? So I guess, my feeling is it's still a risky strategy, but I'm pleased to hear what you think she might have been able to do.
Well, look, I'm definitely going to pick up more on the dangerous Donald thing. I agree totally that I've got a real Hillary Clinton vibe in the last week in terms of their strategy, which I will talk about a little bit later on. But just on this, on the McDonald's thing alone, and then we'll get on to what Harris has been doing this week. I think there was only one way to combat this. I should say, I'm not pretending I know better than professional political strategists, but we have some fun here. This is me being authentic, acting, trying to come up with ideas. I reckon the only way to combat the McDonald's visit was to expose him as a phony. He was trying to expose her as a phony. To expose him as a phony was the only way to deal with it. They actually tried to do that. I think they were thinking the same thing I was thinking. And they tried to do that by suggesting that his fake photo op was fake. That's why they were trying to say, this is all fake, fake Republicans, fake everything. That wasn't going to work by saying a fake photo op is fake, because we all know that. But Tim Walz tried to do this in a different way, and I thought it was a cleverer way, by suggesting that the broader act from Trump, bonding with the working class, is the fake bit, because he doesn't do anything to help them.
Vice President Harris and I grew up middle class. We understand that. She actually worked in a McDonald's. She didn't go and pander and disrespect McDonald's workers by standing there in your red tie and take a picture. His policies are the ones that undermine those very workers that were in that McDonald's, whether it's home ownership, health care, reproductive rights, or cost of products. So there's more work to be done. But just to be very clear, nothing Donald Trump is proposing does anything about the middle class.
Now, I think that's the right concept Tim Walz is going with there, but I actually think the execution could have been better. I reckon Kamala Harris should have done one thing, and only one thing, on the day Donald Trump went to McDonald's. Anything else is a waste of time. She should have just bowled up to a microphone, preferably around some kind of working class environment, and said, I will raise the federal minimum wage to X dollars an hour by the end of my first term. Trump is super vulnerable on that question because, of course, he's not going to follow. Look how he struggled when a reporter asked him whether he thinks the minimum wage should be raised.
Well, I think these people work hard. They're great. And I just saw a process that's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing to see. These are great franchises and produce a lot of jobs, and it's great. And great people working here, too.
But minimum wage is $7.20.
Recently increased.
So, yes, ma'am.
So that is complete horseshit. He said nothing. He was just trying to blather his way through. He had no response whatsoever. And guess what? Kamala Harris has a policy that already exists to raise the minimum wage. But you don't know about that because she hasn't put a dollar figure on it and she hasn't announced it. It's just there in her platform. Why hasn't she done that? I don't know. It's political malpractice. You can't lose. It doesn't cost any money in your budget to say $14 an hour, $15 an hour, $16 an hour. I don't care what you say. Say anything. It doesn't matter whether it's going to happen or not. This is a political campaign. Just say, I support the minimum wage being raised to X, and he won't be able to match her. And I think that would have taken the wind out of his sails completely. It would have been a complete jiu-jitsu move. What do you reckon?
Totally agree. And I mean, I think just even media malpractice, someone should have just called out how much do these workers make an hour? Because there's no way he would know that. And again, it speaks to sort of what I said earlier, that this constituency that people sort of tend to call the white working class as a bit of a coverall, there's a lot of business people and things like that in his coalition, which is why he's never going to talk about minimum wage increases. But I know historically the Democrats have really tied themselves in knots about this ever since the Fight for 15 campaign and Sanders picked it up. And one of the things that they get themselves, it's very, very Democrat head tied up about, is that the minimum wage, $15 an hour in Mississippi goes a lot further than $15 an hour in New York. And Democrats have just never wanted to put a figure on it because of the disparity between states. And like you said, I think just say, there are carve-outs that you can do. There are ways of saying, 12 plus or something like that. But they just don't seem to be able to. Once again, it's that micromanaging culture that they just can't let themselves off the leash enough to go, you know what, this is popular, people would like it, it could be a vote swinger. They sort of see all of the potential pushback against it or the arguments or the problems down the road rather than saying, let's just get these people in the tent and we'll work it out later on.
I'm pretty sure there isn't a single state with super low cost of living the Democrats have a hope in hell of winning. Who cares if they upset the Alabamans? They're not going to vote for the Democrats. So it's just, you might as well go for it. And you don't have to set it at $20. You can set it at $12 or $13 and say, that's because we need time for the rest of the country to catch up. California and New York can have higher minimum wages than that, but we just need a bare minimum. We need to increase it by 50%. If you think that's too low, then what about Trump? He's not even going there. I think that it's just an argument that's just so easy for the Democrats to win, and I can't believe they even tried to fight it. Anyway, whatever, what do I know? You talked before about having seen that interviews that Kamala Harris has conducted this week. This whole week has actually been about interviews for Kamala Harris because she took days off the campaign trail, at least 2 days off the campaign trail entirely to prepare for interviews and the town hall. So what do you think? I asked you to have a look at some of these. What do you think? Were the results obvious on screen?
I just don't think she's great at set pieces. I mean, there's always been stuff coming out of her campaign that she's not a great preparer. And it is so obvious that she's been pumped full of information of say this or don't say that. Yet at the same time, she didn't have great lines prepared for some very obvious questions. She still hasn't worked out how to deal with the Biden stepping down issue. Oh. And it's 2 weeks before the election. So towards the end, and, it was a pretty friendly interview. I mean, the interview was it was good, but where the interview is coming from. And they kept saying about, well, you supported Biden, and then he stepped down. Were you seeing things behind the scenes that made you uncomfortable? And if so, why didn't you address them? And she just kept saying, you'll have to ask Biden if the debate's the only reason why he stepped down. And it just feels unsatisfying. And I just think you've got to have a better line or a better way of deflecting that question because it comes up constantly. And it just feels like there are some things that they just haven't been able to get a handle on. I mean, you also saw that the anti-trans ads appear to be biting. She kept saying, you've got to follow the law. The classic American cop-out, whatever the state says. And then she said, I'm not presuming to be someone's doctor. And you can really see that they're feeling defined by that at the moment. I
actually have that queued up, the trans question. This is the NBC interview you're talking about, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, I've got that queued up. So let's watch that, the entire trans section, and then let's discuss that because I think the trans issue is a critical issue in the swing states in these last few weeks because that is where Trump is sinking all his money. So he is making that a big issue in the swing states. So how she deals with it, I think is important. Let's have a look.
On the question of your beliefs, what you believe in, let me ask you this question very broadly speaking here.
Sure.
Do you believe that transgender Americans should have access to gender-affirming care in this country?
I believe we should follow the law. I mean, I think you're probably pointing to the fact that Donald Trump's campaign has spent tens of millions of dollars.
They're trying to define you on this.
Yes,
I'm asking you to define yourself, though. Just broadly speaking, what is your value? Do you believe they should have that access?
I believe that people, as the law states, even on this issue about federal law, that is a decision that doctors will make in terms of what is medically necessary. I'm not going to put myself in the position of a doctor, but let's also understand that Donald Trump is running tens of millions of dollars in ads to talk about 2 cases, to distract from the fact that his policy and plan is also to take away the Affordable Care Act, which provides health care for tens of millions of people in our country. That his plan is to undo the $35 a month cap on insulin that impacts millions of seniors in our country. That his plan is to do away with the $2,000 cap on prescription medication, the annual cap. That his plan is to get rid of the Department of Education, which would mean getting rid of Head Start. That his plan is to give tax cuts to billionaires and big corporations and on the backs of middle-class working people. So let's not get distracted by the issues that, to your point from the introductory point you raised, people want to know that their president has a plan to make their life better. And that includes bringing down the cost of living. It includes dealing with prescription medication costs. It includes addressing the housing crisis and affordable housing crisis in our country. It includes supporting our small businesses, investing in American industries, and strengthening our economy.
I will move on, but I don't know that I heard a clear answer from you on the issue of gender-affirming care. It sounds like what you're saying is there should be something between trans Americans and their doctors. It feels like that's a long way from "we see you and we love you," which was your message to trans Americans in May. What do you want the LGBTQ plus community to know as they're looking for a full-throated backing from you for trans Americans?
I believe that all people should be treated with dignity and respect, period, and should not be vilified for who they are, and should not be bullied for who they are. And that is a true statement for me my entire career, and that has not changed.
So you didn't find that very convincing, Al?
No, because I think it again makes her look as though she's reacting to everything, and just that there's a vibe and momentum shift very much in favor of the Trump campaign, where she's reacting to everything. And those ads are all over the television at the moment. I live in Louisiana. It's not a consequential state, and that ad is on every ad break, particularly
in Louisiana.
Yeah. Particularly in sports. I mean, we can talk about it more, but it has been so obvious in just the last week that they're really going hard for the black male vote, and because these are all every ad break in sports, and that trans ad is being used constantly.
I suddenly realise what's going on. Sorry, for start, the sports, they're national broadcasts, aren't they?
Yes, but
the ads
I'll have to see how. Yeah, the ads, because they're often run on local affiliate networks, so
sure,
that know it's Fox 8 down here.
Gotcha. Okay,
but it's really noticeable. But
you know what's going on? That just suddenly occurred to me, because I was just thinking about the polling with trans issues, which I talked about this on Planet America, but I was going to go into more detail here. That when you look at the polling, the individual trans issues poll a lot worse than broad thoughts about trans discrimination. I'll give you the figures just to illustrate what I'm talking about. According to Pew, stopping trans athletes from competing on teams that match their gender identity polls 58-17. So no trans women in women's sport, right? 58-17. That's a slaughter. Banning doctors from helping under 18s with medical care for a gender transition polls 46-31. So no sex change operations for people under 18. Banning trans people from using public bathrooms that match their gender identity. So no trans women in women's bathrooms polls 41-31. But if you're a Democrat, you just talk about discrimination and it flips on its head. protecting trans people from discrimination in their jobs, housing, and public spaces polls 64-10. If you just talk about discrimination broadly, it polls like nuts. Like they love it, right? So, and it just suddenly occurred to me what Trump's doing. You said he runs all these ads during sporting contests. Remember the one that polls the worst is stopping trans athletes from competing on teams that match their gender identity. The ads aren't about trans women playing in girls' sports. The ads are about like murderers and government paying for gender reassignment surgery and all this kind of stuff. But what they're trying to do is to piggyback off that polling by talking to the people who are obsessed with this sports issue, who are sports fans. So that's what they're doing. It just suddenly makes sense. Sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah.
You keep going.
No. I mean, that was where I was going. It's I know that those I don't have the figures, but from what I understand, I think it tends to be men that feel a lot more strongly about that. That trans women shouldn't be able to compete in women's sports. They, I think there's a duty to protect or something like that. But it's very obvious that it's the male vote that they're going for, just by virtue of the fact it's in sports stuff, which men tend to watch more than women. I mean, I live in a majority black city, but so we. Obviously there's going to be a lot more advertising with black voices and things like that in it. But you can really feel the campaign having turned up to go for black votes at the moment. I mean, just the fact that usual Republican ads that you see in Louisiana, because it's a very politically white dominated state, they never have any issue with just having, Jeff Landry and his blue-eyed kids all over everything. But right now the ad campaigns are, as I say, going really hard on the trans issue and going really hard for black voters. So I think that it's clearly something that the Republicans have seen or felt, that there are, more reachable people in this demographic. And I mean, we're seeing it anyway, that Latino and black voters are, particularly men, particularly non-college educated, are starting to move over to the Republican Party. So I think that these, particularly sort of micro-targeted issues, I guess, like trans stuff, in the bigger picture, it's not really, it's a very small segment of American people that we're talking about here, yet it is becoming such a campaign-defining issue. And I think we are going to see those kind of smaller issues really blown out of proportion when they can say something about the larger culture, or when we can see that they're able to kind of key in on a particular micro demographic that you might be able to start moving people over. And that obviously goes for both sides, but it's just so apparent right now that this is what the Republicans are doing, and that the Democrats are quite spooked by it.
It's interesting that you say that this trans campaign this anti-trans campaign may be about targeting black and Latino men. Or young black and Latino men, because I was actually just thinking, I didn't even mention this during the McDonald's thing, but it applies to the McDonald's thing as well, that one of the reasons I think Donald Trump is successful at reaching out to black and Latino young men is because he doesn't appeal to them on a racial basis. Every now and then he does in a clumsy way at a press conference, like he'll talk about black jobs or something just ridiculous. But the actual hard pitch is usually on a class basis or an economic basis or a cultural basis. It's never on a racial basis. The Democrats tend to appeal on a racial basis. Obama comes out there and he says, okay, young black men, you need to support the black woman. That's what you need to do as young black men. She's supporting your community. Like, he's just flat out talking about them as black people. Whereas I don't think Republicans do that much at all. I think that they appeal to them. We're using cultural solidarity and class solidarity. And that works twice as well, because it also appeals to the white working class as well at the same time. I think that's part of the secret a bit. And so I didn't think about that with the trans thing, but that's probably part of it as well. You're probably right. What I was going to say was that with, can I keep on going, or are you going to jump in there?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just, I was just going to say it was interesting in Kamala's NBC interview as well, that they tried to press her on the sexism, are you worried that black men won't vote for you? and she just wouldn't. She wasn't going there. You know, it was very clear that they sent Obama out as a bit of a trial balloon on that. And I think, as Dave said last week, it did really feel like a classic bit of Democrat vote scolding, which is just never a great idea. But, you know, when Obama was talking about that, it reminded me of you know, like when your PE teacher in high school had to do the sex talk.
Yeah.
And it was just that very, very awkward, no one's enjoying this, you know, do we really have to go here? Can we not do these things, you know, in private or something? And it just had that very awkward thing. And I think you're seeing, I mean, Kamala's just not going to go there because clearly vote scolding isn't a popular thing. So it does kind of call into question why they had Obama out there doing it in the first place.
There was certainly not a lot of joy about Obama scolding young black men for not voting for Kamala. That is for sure. Sorry, before I go on, I should also say I agree with you about Kamala Harris. I think that's something that she's done really well in this campaign and should be given a lot of credit for, because she's just about the first Democrat to do that, to just, from the beginning, there's been no first woman president, no black woman president. There's been none of that at all. She's refused to go there. When Trump tried to draw her into it by saying to her, doing the "you're not really black" thing, she would never bar of it. She said, same old dance, next question. So I do give her credit for that, but a lot of her compadres haven't got the message yet. But I was just going to say, I wasn't so down on her answer as you were on the trans thing, because I could see the cogs going around in her mind. I know what she was trying to do. I don't think she quite nailed it, but I understood the logic of her answer. I think what she was trying to do was to say, okay, first of all, this is a distraction from all the issues that she wants to provide. And then she talks to promote, and then she talks about those issues. That's what the first thing she was trying to do was just change the topic. Just go, I don't want to talk about this. Let's talk about the things that poll well that I want to talk about and I want to get out in this interview. That's fair enough. That's a time-honored technique of a politician. Sure. Then she said, in the second part of her answer towards the end, in fact, it was the last thing she said. She said, this is all about treating everyone the same. I believe in treating everybody the same. I noted she never used the word trans. She didn't want to say the word, which I found interesting. But regardless of that, she said this is about equality, and I think that's a great line. I think that's a very smart line. That appeals to the polling I just told you before. Let's not talk about this particular issue. Let's talk about ending discrimination and just treating everybody the same. That is a perfectly poll-tested response to this question, and I thought that was very clever. The only problem is the last thing she said. It should have been the first thing she said, I think. If I was her, I would have started off with, I just think we should treat all people the same. Trans, or I would have said the word, trans or otherwise. If we pay for your healthcare in that circumstance, we should pay for everyone's healthcare in that circumstance. And then you go straight to the distraction line. I just think it's all distraction. What Trump does, Trump wants to spend $20 million not talking about his economic plan and this plan, that plan. So just start with the economy. So start with equality, which is what polls well. That answers the question, and then change the topic. You're out of there. And she could have done that in a minute rather than 3 minutes doing it the wrong way around. That's all I would say. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I'm not down on her answer per se. I just think it's revealing that she's spooked by it. And that it also shows that this is a set piece. You know that you've been hammered by this. I think there's been $29 million of anti-trans ad in the last 5 weeks. You know that it's becoming an issue. Have your set piece ready to go. Yeah. And like you said, it is a good thing. And I think that it just intrinsically feels like there probably is some space to go after those Nikki Haley type Republicans in the suburbs where you say, you know, when especially suburban women, right? I don't think it's this great vote winner that Republicans think it is, saying that your kid with blue hair who's having some issues that you should just, you know, cast them out on the street and make sure that they're bullied at school. That's not going to be appealing. And Kamala's ultimate message, which is, they should just be treated equal and have people, work with their doctors and things like that. That's all very reasonable. And I think, particularly suburban women types that they're going for, that would make a lot of sense. And so it once again comes back to just that message discipline, that they just don't have the killer lines ready to go. And that just strikes me as evidence, I don't know, maybe that she's not a great campaigner, maybe that they're reacting too much to things, but that's a layup, and just not nailing that in the second last week of a campaign, I think is pretty unforgivable.
It annoys me a lot that, I agree with you completely, it annoys me a lot that they don't have set answers for the 10 questions she gets every single time. Like, I reckon she might have gotten 13 or 14 different questions in this entire campaign. You keep hearing the same questions over and over again, and she keeps not having answers. I thought she did have her answer on what you'd be different from Joe Biden in the Fox News interview last week, but then she's gone back to a different answer again. She just should just get a set answer and just stick to it. Like, it's strange. It's strange because it's not like she can't memorize answers. Look at the debate. She had the whole thing planned. She did so well in that context. So she can memorize answers. I don't know why she hasn't got the basic answers memorized by now. That's strange. Or not even planned maybe. I don't know. Let's go then to the other thing that you raised, the Hillary campaign there, which is there's kind of 3 branches to it, I guess. There's one which isn't really Hillary. This is more a turnaround is fair play from Biden, which is Trump is old. That's one aspect. The Trump is old and in decline. And then there's also Trump is a fascist who Republicans don't even want to vote for, don't even support. His own team don't even support him. They're the basic, it's like a trifecta, and they swirl around and they use different bits and pieces and put them together in different combinations. Let's start with the first one, the Trump is in decline one, because I think that's the easiest one to deal with. That's what they were talking about when he danced to music for 39 minutes in a rally last week. That was the Trump is in decline, Trump is old. Last week Kamala Harris was talking about how he was too exhausted to do interviews because he's too tired. That's why he's pulling out of interviews for, not because he's trying to avoid mainstream outlets, which is what he actually was doing. He was only pulling out from mainstream outlets. But and by the way, as an aside, he hasn't done an interview with a mainstream outlet for 6 weeks now. And if Kamala Harris hadn't been too busy hiding from interviews until 2 weeks ago, she could have attacked him on that. But now she's doing heaps. Now she's doing more than enough. I'm not complaining about what she's doing now. But if she'd been doing that for the last month and a half, she could have painted a picture of him being too extreme to even talk to the mainstream. But she that wasn't available to her because it was too easy for them to say, well, what have you been doing? But anyway, that aside, she was saying he was exhausted and tired and old. And it's not like there's no evidence of this. I actually saw this clip. This is Trump not knowing that he's calling out for someone who is literally sitting next to him when he's calling out for them. Have a look at this.
Yeah, where's Christy? Is she around? Let's see. Right here. Christy. Oh, Christy. Oh, my Christy.
Yeah. So he's saying, Christy, where's Christy? Even to someone he's actually looked at her at one point in time saying, where's Christy? And he kept on going. It's safe to say if Biden did that 6 months ago, it would have been the biggest story of the day. But I don't think that video even got around to many people. I don't think it wasn't really big news at all. And my view is that the old attack doesn't really work for Trump because I just think he seems a bit batty, but he doesn't seem old. He doesn't seem to lack energy. He's almost got insane energy about him. And I just don't think that works the same way the Biden one works. What's your view?
Yeah, I think that part of Trump's appeal, right, is that he says the things that you're not supposed to say.
Yeah.
And so people don't, and his voters particularly, or people that he appeals to, like that. So, if it's a bit that, grandpa's getting a bit old and doddery, but he's saying, the things at Thanksgiving lunch, people are fine with that. And that's, that's part of the transgressive appeal of Trump. And so it's generally a benefit for his campaign. And once again, he's just such a unique political figure that he's able to get away with all these things that anyone else would, just be an albatross.
Okay, well, let's talk about the other attacks then. That Trump is a fascist dictator, even according to Republicans who worked for him. I mean, that's the ad campaign that Harris has been running in swing states while Trump has been running the ad campaign about trans people. This is the ad campaign Harris has been running. Have a look at this.
In 2016, Donald Trump said he would choose only the best people to work in his White House. Now those people have a warning for America. Trump is not fit to be president again. Here's his vice president.
Anyone who puts themselves over the Constitution should never be president of the United States.
I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump this year.
His defense secretary.
Do you think Trump can be trusted with the nation's secrets ever again?
No. I mean, it's just irresponsible action that places our service members at risk, places our nation's security at risk.
His national security advisor.
Donald Trump will cause a lot of damage. The only thing he cares about is Donald Trump.
And the nation's former highest-ranking military officer.
We don't take an oath to a king or a queen or to a tyrant or a dictator. We don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator.
Take it from the people who knew him best. Donald Trump is too big a risk for America.
So that ad campaign's been running for a few weeks. That's how it started. But then this whole tactic sort of kicked up a gear when Harris turned up on Charlemagne the God.
And it's two very different visions for our nation. One mind that is about taking us forward and progress and investing in the American people, investing in their ambitions, dealing with their challenges. And the other, Donald Trump, is about taking us backward.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
Yes, we can say that.
Yeah. And that was the moment that subtext became billboards. We then had Mark Milley describing Trump as fascist to the core. Then this week, John Kelly said that Trump was a fascist as well. The very dictionary definition of a fascist he read out. I should say John Bolton said that Trump is too stupid to be a fascist, which was one of the funnier clips of the week, I thought.
I think it's a mistake to get into a controversy over whether Trump meets the definition of fascist or not. I think his behavior alone is troubling enough. To be a fascist, you have to have a philosophy. Trump's not capable of that. Adolf Hitler wrote a profoundly troubling book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Donald Trump couldn't even read his way all the way through that book, let alone write something like it. I'm not trying to understate the dangers of a Trump presidency. I think it's important to focus on the dangers themselves.
And then John Bolton went on to say that he used to think Trump had the mind of an 11-year-old, but he actually has the mind of a 1-year-old, which was an interesting defense of Trump from accusing him of being a fascist. What do you think about this line of argument? Do you think this takes paint off Trump?
I mean, once again, you could see potentially for your, suburban Virginia voter or whatever has often been the mean that Democrats are going for to pull those people away from the Republican, the Nikki Haley voters. I mean, my just instinct is that it's more of a red meat for Democrats to energize people and to get them, again, to kind of try and slow that momentum shift a bit, because it really has been liberals, people very in the tank for Kamala, a lot of media figures who have been calling for her to say that he is a fascist, this is fascism, for months. And it just feels to me to be a bit more of a red meat, to give people some energy and to give them a bit more of what they want in the last week of the campaign.
It's really interesting you say that, because I saw a graph today which illustrated that maybe the Democrats do have an enthusiasm problem. And I'm not talking about whether the joy's still there or not. I'm talking about the fact that I remember about a month ago, I showed you guys a graph from Monmouth about the massive enthusiasm edge that Kamala Harris had over Donald Trump in terms of the base. I showed you, I'll put up the graph now. I showed you how between June and August 2024, the enthusiasm amongst Democrats went from 46% to 85%, whereas the enthusiasm in this election amongst Republicans from June to August went from 71% to 71%. And then in September 2024, the Democrats basically stayed the same. They dropped from 85 down to 84. The Republicans moved from 71 up to 74. Still a huge edge for Democrats. But then in October 2024, the Democrats dropped from 84% being enthusiastic for the election to 81% being enthusiastic for the election. And the Republicans moved up from 74% to 82%. So now there is a Republican edge again in enthusiasm. I never would have thought of that before, but maybe you're right. Maybe the Democrats are gone, we've got a problem here with our own base. And so you have on one hand, Kamala Harris trying to reach out to Republicans to try and get those independents, those middle ground voters. But the rest of the campaign is dedicated to trying to boost the base through fascism talk. I hadn't thought of that. I mean, maybe that is what's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, when there's such an ecosystem of volunteers and things like that, and as we'll be talking about, Democrats have always, you know, have a much better ground game. But it is, you know, keeping those people enthused and knocking on doors and, you know, making sure that you're speaking to your neighbors and driving the old lady down the street to the polling booth because she doesn't have a car, like stuff like that does matter. And I think that's when you do have to really rustle up the energy and get your people, you know, coming out and doing those small volunteer acts within their community to get people out to vote.
I want to read your correspondence because it was sufficiently abusive for me to take notice of. No, it wasn't abusive at all. No one's abusive. No peppers are abusive. You're all lovely. But I thought it raised an interesting discussion point, which is relevant to this topic. Last week, I heaped a little bit of shit on Will Stansel for tweeting out that if only the media had covered Donald Trump, his negatives just a little bit more like they would some other candidates, his campaign would be over. And I said, oh, come on. Like they haven't covered the negatives in the Donald Trump campaign enough. I mean, like that's all they say. All they say is negatives about Donald Trump. Andrew wrote to us about this, and he said, Stansel made the point later that end his campaign tomorrow part of the tweet. That was hyperbolic. But that wasn't the point. The point wasn't about details. The point was about presentation, as Stansel said later. Obviously, the news couldn't force him to drop out, but covering his authoritarian threat and general unfitness with even half the urgency it covered Biden's age would inflict serious damage with swing votes and push his numbers down. Stansel's theory, by my example, he says, being now that Biden isn't being attacked by the media about his age. His polling is now somewhat improved. He's looked at as more of an elder statesman. He's given the benefit of the doubt. Again, by example, all of those accusations and largely lies thrown at him about FEMA funding and not calling Republican representatives in disaster areas didn't stick to him. And they've been largely proven wrong, and most importantly, not used as accusations of senility. Again, by example, I doubt most MAGA people remember any of the details surrounding her emails scandal. However, anytime Hillary Clinton appears in public, the usual MAGA supporters absolutely hound her with her emails and further increasingly dangerous conspiracies. Not because the media just published a story in 2016, but because the media prosecuted and saturated the story in the public sphere in 2016. The media defined the zeitgeist. The details were unimportant. Is he right that if the media covered the fascist thing just that little bit harder and the unfit to serve just that little bit more, or maybe a lot more, like they did Clinton's emails in 2016, it would have the same effect?
I think it's difficult, but yeah, there does seem to be a bit of media malpractice going on here. I know that someone sort of got a heap of newspaper front covers the other day after, I think it was John Kelly said, that Trump had said he wished he had generals like Hitler did.
Yes.
Which is also very amusing because obviously he doesn't know about von Stauffenberg.
Yes.
and it barely got any coverage. And I saw that Jamel Bowie, who's a New York Times op-ed writer, he said on Blue Sky, which is the Twitter alternative that a lot of people have been migrating to, he even said that he felt like his own newspaper sort of buried their own story a bit there, that they reported on it but didn't make it a sensational thing. And yeah, it just is a bit of a curious blind spot. In some ways, I guess I have some of the same reservations as Dave talked about last week or recently, that in using fascism, that it has very specific historical context, and obviously it is so pro-state, and that Trump is very much about dismantling a lot of parts of the state, so it doesn't fit on conveniently. But there does seem to be just a real, I guess, conservatism in sort of mainstream US press about saying these things. I mean, if you think about, who owns papers, I mean, Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Times. If saying that in a pretty much neck and neck presidential race, that one of the candidates is a fascist, I mean, that's not going to be great for the stock market, right? And this is the owner of Amazon, who's, everything's sort of predicated on stock prices. So I think that there is a lot of just establishment business just saying that they don't want to rock the boat by trashing a particular presidential candidate, even though there's a lot of legitimate reason to, and potentially doing things like tanking the stock market. I also think there has been some evidence coming out that it escapes me now, but I think it was that the LA Times proprietor has refused to endorse Harris, which stopped the editorial wing of the paper from endorsing Harris because apparently he fears retribution from Trump for some of his other businesses.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah. And I mean, you could see someone like Jeff Bezos could potentially be concerned about that as well. So I think that there is a lot of corporate considerations potentially going into this as much as anything else. But I also think that there just is a general press gallery kind of ethos where they just wouldn't want to go out on a limb about talking about fascism like that. I think there just is inherent conservatism, both in the journalists that cover this, but certainly there's corporate considerations that we probably haven't really considered yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Jamie Dimon is another one who supports Harris, but is doing it secretly because he's worried about economic repercussions or financial repercussions if Trump wins. Probably not unreasonably. I got to say, Andrew, correspondent, I don't disagree with you. I mean, the Clinton emails coverage, in my view, was way out of proportion for any story at all, let alone one as minor a story as those emails actually should have been. And I do agree. The key here is that things should get equal coverage when there's seen to be a serious issue for that candidate. I agree. So in the case of Biden, his greatest problem was his age. So it should have got lots of coverage. I think that's fair enough. In the case of Trump, I'd say his biggest problem isn't his age, so it shouldn't get so much coverage. I think he has two big problems, in my view. You can agree to disagree if you like. Number one, his economic plans make no sense whatsoever. I think that is the most under-coverage story in this election, including, by the way, by Planet America. I very much intend to talk about deportations next week on Planet America. I'm planning to talk about deportations now in the Unleashed afterwards, if I can pull it together, because I'm really not very prepared. And I'm definitely going to talk about the economic plans next week at some point in time, because I think it's essential before the election to talk about how nonsensical his economic plans are. They really are garbage. That's the first problem I think he's got, which I think is way undercovered. And number two, that he is a genuine authoritarian. I think that's true. I think that's been covered more, especially at the moment. Stories like the enemy from within, which we're going to get to again. That's my favorite story at the moment. I think that should get a lot of coverage. And to the extent it hasn't been covered enough, I agree with you, Andrew, that's a problem, although I think that has gotten a fair bit of coverage. Where I disagree is that this would necessarily make a difference. Because I just think people, especially people who are likely to vote for Trump, are inured to negative stories about Trump. They don't even hear them most of the time. And when they do, they just write them off. I think many people simply don't trust the media anymore when it comes to Trump. And there's nothing that can be done about that. I think it's just a fact. I'll be interested to see how historians break this down in the future. But I mean, am I wrong? What do you think, Elle?
No, and I mean, I think for a lot of people that vote for him or like his message, if you say that Trump wants to be a dictator, they might well say, great.
Yeah.
You know, so much is predicated on the existing establishment sucks. We are marginalized. We're being besieged by the secular world around us. We can't, do anything without having this liberal culture pumped down our throat. And if you said, yeah, he's an authoritarian and he's going to take charge, they'd say, great.
I think, sadly, you are correct. Okay, I want to just split apart those two arguments. That number one, even Trump's own supporters and staff think he's unfit to be president. And number two, he's a fascist who's a danger to democracy. I want to split them apart and talk about the polling here, because I think this is something where we can add a peppy twist that you won't hear anywhere else. There's a company called Blueprint, which I love their work. And I love the jazz hands, Elle. More of that, please. There's a company called Blueprint I love talking about because they test attack lines on focus groups. And then focus groups of independents. And they talk about how those lines affect the views of those independents. And the reason I like it so much is because I am 100% sure that the Democratic Party uses Blueprint. If they don't use Blueprint, they use a company very close to Blueprint. It comes up with identical results. Because I see over and over again the Democratic Party ads reflecting exactly what Blueprint told them to do. So I think this is a window into what they're thinking about, the real sort of message people. And I want to read you what Blueprint found on the best attack lines for the Democrats in the last few weeks. The top closing argument, this added 14 points amongst independents. This argument was, quote, nearly half of Donald Trump's cabinet have refused to endorse him. When Trump learned during the Capitol riot that his supporters were threatening to kill his own vice president, he said, so what? And he refused to do anything to ensure the vice president was safe. Republican governors, senators, and House members have all said the same thing. We can't give Trump another 4 years as president. Now that was just the attack line version of that ad I played a couple of minutes ago. That was the exact Democrat ad that they were running in the swing states. So they obviously are using that line to try to win the vote. So that is the Republicans even his Republican staffers don't think he should be president line, which is the first line. But one of the lower ranked arguments, this one took 3 points off independents, was the following. Donald Trump doesn't have the character it takes to be president. He's erratic and can't control himself. He denied the results of an election just because he lost and is a threat to the fundamental American principle of democracy. He instigated a riot at the Capitol that left 3 police officers dead. Okay, so that's not exactly the second argument of the fascist thing, but it's getting in the ballpark. Like they're moving towards the argument that polls badly, which is interesting. That might not be their choice. Maybe they're being moved there by John Kelly and Mark Milley and other people. But it's just interesting that they start off on a very strong polling line and they're gradually being maneuvered into a poor polling line. And by the way, that also is a Hillary Clinton type line, the dangerous Donald. That's the dangerous Donald line, that one there, right? Although, having said that, in the swing states, Harris is really laser focused on that first high polling argument. Remember the one about the Republicans don't rate her? Look at this ad. This is another one they're playing in the swing states.
Of 100 Republicans who worked in national security for Presidents Reagan, both Bushes, and for President Trump, now endorsing Harris for president.
She came up as a prosecutor, an attorney general, into the Senate. She has the kind of character that's going to be necessary in the presidency.
Vice President Harris is standing in the breach at a critical moment in our nation's history. We have a shared commitment as Americans to do what's right for this country. This year, I am proudly casting my vote for Vice President Kamala Harris.
Former generals, secretaries of defense, secretaries of the Army, Navy, and Air Force, CIA directors, and National Security Council leaders under Democratic and Republican presidents, Republican members of Congress, and even former Trump administration officials agree there's only one candidate fit to lead our nation, and that's Kamala Harris.
I'm Kamala Harris, and I approve this message.
So that ad might shed light on why Kamala Harris has spent the last 2 weeks palling around with Liz Cheney. It might not get the memes, but maybe it gets the poll results. We don't know, but that is what Blueprint found. And so whether Blueprint are right or not, that explains what they're thinking, which is what I always find interesting. What are the parties actually thinking? Why are they making these seemingly strange decisions? Which I must admit, I thought doing the Liz Cheney tour was a strange decision, but maybe there's reason to it. Do you have any thoughts about any of this before I go
on? No, I will just say, I meant to mention earlier, just speaking about the Hillary Redux. She was interviewed on CNN last night. And one of the things they said about, do you think Kamala can win? And she said, oh, well, she doesn't have Jim Comey to kneecap her in the final week of the campaign. It's kind of almost, there's still something in the blood of a lot of the Democratic establishment, I think, that just aren't dealing with 2016 still.
Yeah, at least in Hillary Clinton's blood. I wanted to read you a couple of the other arguments that they had from Blueprint, just for curiosity's sake. The second strongest argument, which added 12 points to independence, was Donald Trump appointed the judges who overturned Roe versus Wade. Since then, Trump abortion bans have been passed in 22 states and women are dying because they can't get the care they need. Now he wants to go further with plans to restrict birth control, ban abortion nationwide, and even monitor women's pregnancies. Kamala Harris will protect women's rights and freedoms because the government should not be allowed to control women's personal medical decisions. No prizes for guessing that abortion would have been up there. We're going to get to that a little bit later on. I think that makes sense. And to be honest, I'm slightly surprised we haven't seen more abortion, but maybe it's under the radar. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later on. Project 2025 lost 4 points amongst independents, their argument. I won't read the whole lot, but Project 2025 did not rate well. The national debt argument was just about the worst. That lost 6 points amongst independents, and that's the reason why no one cares about my opinions, because I personally am freaking out about the national debt in this election, but no one else gives a stuff. I do predict...
You're a weirdo. You have to remember at all times you are a weirdo.
I really shouldn't tell these kinds of anecdotes on PEP because they're going to be thrown back in my face at some point in time in the future. But when I was at uni, a girl I dated used to have a rule that Chaz can't be used as an example to illustrate anything that normal people do or think. Like when there's an argument and someone said, but Chaz says, no, he can't be used as an example. He's not allowed to be used as an example to illustrate anything that normal people do or think.
Not unreasonable. Just a bit behind the curtain. Chaz is running a 90-minute sleep from last night, and it is currently 1:30 a.m., 2:30 a.m.
2:17 a.m. at the moment now.
So just on the weird / not normal factor, but go on.
I might be looking a little red-eyed by the time we get to the Unleashed, which I have to prepare after this before I actually read it out. But yeah, I just wanted to set up what Blueprint we're doing before we moved on to the Liz Cheney section, because I've got so many questions about this. Because that's what Harris has been doing as well, is going on tour with Liz Cheney. They've been campaigning in the suburbs in swing states. You mentioned that they weren't very memeable. I mentioned that Liz Cheney theoretically polls well, maybe not Liz Cheney, but Republicans who are against Trump poll well theoretically. What do you think about this strategy? Do you think it's sound at all? Like, to try and peel off Republican votes in the suburbs, white women. Obviously, white women is what they're going for here. Do you think Liz Cheney works?
I think it certainly has merit. When you see that interview, what I think that they're doing, which I think could be a sound strategy. Like I said, I'm very wary of them just rerunning the playbook from 2016. When you see the interview with Liz Cheney, and I can't remember who the moderator was that when they did their sit-down talk this week, it was such a taking the temperature down kind of interview. It's all very calm. It's saying, look, we're all reasonable here, you know, and putting aside, you know, voting for the lesser of two evils, even though I don't believe in abortion. And what I think that probably conventionally has been missed by strategists and pollsters in the media is that these are probably, you know, traditionally more male-dominated things, and they don't understand that, for example, a lot of women, particularly, you know, the suburban mums that we've been talking about a lot, will see something like January 6th and think that that's, you know, this kind of untrammeled violence is really awful, and that they do just want the temperature taken down on things, do just want everyone to just calm down, do probably want the men to shut up about you know, whether it's trans stuff and you know, alienating kids or these, you know, the very hyper masculine nature of the Trump campaign and a lot of Republican campaigns in general. And so I think that they're obviously seeing something in this, or they wouldn't be pursuing it. But yeah, I think it presents a different message. And while it's not memeable, like I mentioned earlier, you know, it's probably not getting out there on TikTok. It is, you know, maybe those suburban women who might be, you know, watching The View or the Today Show who are seeing these things, and just the aesthetics and the lowering the volume, lowering the tone, that there probably is some wider appeal to them. And yeah, I mean, clearly, like you said, it's showing up that people are listening to this. And we are certainly already seeing that white women are coming over to Kamala Harris's campaign. So over the last 72 years, white women have only ever voted for the Democratic candidate in a plurality of white women have only voted for the Democratic candidate in 2 elections. So Lyndon Johnson in 1964 and Bill Clinton in 1996.
Which was passing anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Actually, they both were. They're both smashings. Yeah.
Yeah. 47% of white women voted for Trump in 2016, 45% backed Clinton, and Trump's lead grew with white women in 2020. So 53% supported him, while 95% of black women voted for Biden, 61% of Hispanic women voted for Biden. But it looks like particularly younger white women are peeling off from the GOP. So between 2011 and 2024, liberal identification in young white women rose by 6%. And at the moment, all usual caveats with the polls, but Trump holds just all caveats with the polls, Trump holds just a 1% point lead among white women. So it really seems like white women are coming back to the Democratic fold, and it probably doesn't take too much to suggest that abortion is probably a big factor in this, and the general climate. So I mean, it does make sense to be appealing, you know, the kind of people who would be interested in what Liz Cheney has to say, with someone who has been able to articulate fairly well, I think, in that interview, that while she has always been pro-life, that you know, Kamala, that there's more urgent things afoot, and you know, voting for Kamala is effectively the lesser of two evils.
Yeah, I was going to say, Harry Anton had a lot to say about white women recently, which I'll play a clip of it. This was he was talking about different polls, I think, to the polls that you were citing, so the numbers are slightly different, but the theme is very similar. This is Harry Anton on CNN.
Let's take a look here. The GOP's margin among white women. Look, Romney won him by 9, all right? Trump in 2016 won him by 6. You go back 4 years ago, Trump won him by 7. Look now, look how much lower Trump's margin is among white women. Look, he still leads, but it's well within the margin of error. It's just a point. He's doing 6 points worse than he did 4 years ago. In fact, he's doing the worst, if this holds, for a GOP candidate this century among white women, John.
Well, how much do white women matter in the electorate?
So this is the whole thing, right? How much do they matter? If you were to break it down, white women, white men, women of color, men of color, white women make up the plurality of the electorate, 36%. So, you know, yesterday we were talking about those massive gains that Donald Trump was making among black men, black women. But the bottom line is they actually make up a considerably smaller portion of the electorate than white women do. So when we're talking about 5, 6 point shifts, 7 point shifts in Kamala Harris's direction, we're talking about that among a major part of the electorate, and that can actually move the overall electorate more than ginormous shifts among a considerably smaller part of the electorate.
You can just do the math.
So yeah, that's actually an interesting, especially that last bit I thought was really interesting, how many more white women there are than black and Latino men. There's a few examples of that, I think, in this election where people are sleeping on some of the demographic trades that favor the Democrats. There's a lot of talk about demographic trades that favor Trump. Lots of talk about Latino men, young Latino men, and young men in general, Latino men and black men. How many times have you heard people talk about old people? I mentioned on Pollymarket today, Kamala Harris is winning amongst old people. Joe Biden in 2020 lost amongst old people. There's a 5-point turnaround, according to the New York Times Siena poll. How many voters are old people? Old people all come out to vote. If Kamala Harris wins 5 points on old people, that's going to be massive. No one's even talking about it. They just pretend it's not happening. There is a trade-off going on. And in this case, the trade-off is, white women for black and Latino men. And maybe the black and Latino men might favor Trump. Maybe the white women will favor Harris. We don't know. It's a trade-off. They're going in opposite direction. We'll find out on the day. But on the list,
so just on that. Oh, yeah. Sorry. I was going to say that. I think there is this one thing as well with the Democratic strategy. Well, I'm not necessarily wild about it, just on a personal level. I mean, going for this, for the Liz Cheney, for the Nikki Haley voter, is that this moderate suburban white woman is way more likely to vote in midterms. She is way more likely than young people, poor people, working class people, people of color. She's way more likely to be a party donor, and she's way less likely to ask for stuff.
Yeah.
Like, she's not going to ask for big policy proposals that Democrats traditionally get hobbled by. She's not asking for, fight for 15, raising the minimum wage. She's, goes, tax grants for tax credits for Pell Grant recipients in minority neighborhoods. Yeah, that sounds like a great policy. Mentorship programs for young black men and cryptocurrency protection. Yeah, that all sounds fine. And I think that is part of the wider strategy as well of why Democrats are chasing them, because they're giving them more and asking less. And that's just, a simple mathematics. It obviously makes sense.
That's a really interesting point. And I'm sure they are a godsend, generally speaking, especially in midterms. But if that's the case, they're at their least useful in a high turnout presidential election when everyone's offering lots of goodies because the offers are there and the incentives for everyone to vote are there, and they'll be there anyway, whether those incentives are there or not. So if ever they don't matter, it would be during this election. But you're right, as a general rule of thumb, they're a very valuable support base to have.
But I mean, we probably did see them move the needle in the midterms, right? That a lot of people didn't see coming.
Totally.
So I think, and as I sort of said before, I think with just the general energy, enthusiasm, getting out to vote, helping your neighbors vote, doing all that kind of volunteer stuff, that's very just the natural home of, and I say this as kind of a middle-class white suburban woman myself, that's kind of the thing that you can see them doing. So I think the strategy does connect there. But like you said, it's just the ultimate effectiveness of it. And is it worth casting out a lot of other people in favor of these women who do seem to have a lot of ticks in a lot of columns, but ultimately how effective they're going to be overall remains to be seen.
Were you describing yourself before? Do you volunteer and do you?
No, they take my taxes, but not my vote. So I'm not a I'm not a citizen. So I'm just just a pet eating immigrant.
Sure. I did find one thing interesting before we move on about that rally, the Liz Cheney rally. Well, there's a few, but the one with the interview. Liz Cheney was asked her views on the abortion issue, which, as you say, she is pro-life. And so what did she have to say in that environment? This is what she had to say.
I'm pro-life. And I have been very troubled, deeply troubled by what I have watched happen in so many states since Dobbs. And I have been troubled by the extent to which you have women who, as the Vice President said, in some cases have died, who can't get medical treatment that they need because providers are worried about criminal liability. We're facing a situation today where I think that it's an untenable one.
And that all sounds fine, except in February 2021, which is, by the way, after Liz Cheney broke with Trump, she co-sponsored the Life at Conception Act, which would impose a national abortion ban from the moment of fertilization. It sought to, quote, implement equal protection under the 14th Article of Amendment to the Constitution for the right to life of each born and preborn human person. Now, not only would they have gone way further than any abortion ban does right now, with zero exceptions, but it arguably would have outlawed IVF as well. That was the bill that Liz Cheney co-sponsored. So my question to you, is that just standard political hypocrisy, where someone just changes all their views when they join the other side? Is it just Cheney doing whatever she has to do to not undermine Kamala Harris at a rally? Or is that an indication of how far the abortion issue has moved and how important it might yet be in this election that Liz Cheney is sounding, well, not pro-choice, but a hell of a lot more pro-choice than she would have when she sponsored the Life at Conception Act?
I mean, look, that's a great question. And I mean, to get in the mind of a Cheney would potentially make me a war criminal. But I mean, look, it's sometimes with these figures, particularly with people with family dynasties and names, they do tend to like to stay in the media cycle for attention and relevance. So I do wonder how much this is just Liz Cheney being relevant. But I mean, certainly, I think you see the very visceral reaction that we saw in the midterms and that we have seen when it comes to things like IVF and when it comes to what the Dobbs ruling has meant. I think it is very palpable. It's something that women certainly are talking about. I have a friend here who was recently in her second trimester and had a late miscarriage, and got in a couple of days before the really severe rules came in Louisiana, and was literally in a hospital bed Googling if she needed to get out of the state. And those kind of stories are what women are talking about, I think, and again in those in group chats and in private things that these stories are going around, and they're very relatable. And I think even the most sort of rusted on pro-life old school Republican women, evangelicals, will understand this in terms that men can't, or that just aren't abstract at all. And so I think it is having a real cut through just in things that people are talking about that might might not necessarily always be as perceptible, although, as I mentioned, we are seeing it in those polls. But this is just a very, very live issue for a lot of people. And I suspect that perhaps Cheney has seen that just within her social circles, that people are talking about this, and that, it is commendable to make a stand, and I think, and to try and thread that needle, which a lot of people have been unwilling or unable to do, between being pro-life, but also this is ridiculous. And the I would say unintended consequences, but I'm not sure how unintended those consequences necessarily are from some lawmakers, but certainly that they are being felt, and that they are being talked about.
Let's talk more about abortion as an issue, because I think that it might, in 2 weeks' time, we might be looking back and saying that was the issue. Even though we didn't really talk about it in the last month of the campaign, it was actually the issue in the end. So let's talk about it a little bit more. First of all, let me ask you a question, just based on what you just said just then. One of the questions which I've been wondering about is in a place like Michigan, where they're all sorted. They've had their abortion vote, and they've got complete pro-choice rules in the Constitution, I think now. Or if not the Constitution, at least there's a law there that voted by the people, no problems. They're safe as houses. The government can't stop them. Why do they care about this issue? Because it's not going to affect any of them. That's a question which I've had in my mind. Is this only going to affect, as an issue, states which have skin in the game, as opposed to states that don't? And some of those swing states don't have skin in the game. Are you of the view that the women in those states will be just as motivated as the women in the at-risk states, because they have friends in the other states and they hear the stories from the other states? Is that your view?
Very much so. Again, this isn't particularly scientific, but I think it just, for a lot of people, this is what's coming down the pipeline. And I mean, it obviously doesn't help Trump's campaign. I mean, all of the stuff that Trump's been saying in private, he knows this is electoral poison for him. And, when you do see the most hardened people talk about this issue, the kinds of people to do with the Federalist Society and all those kind of groups, and the Heritage Foundation, and the kind of political figures who are out there beating the drum on this stuff, they will constantly say, well, we're not going to rest until we have this, this law in everywhere. I mean, when you think about Wisconsin, they had for a long time, their state Supreme Court was just completely captured by very far right figures. And so they're aware of how quickly things can turn. And I think, you do hear, people are talking more and more about how it's, judicial rule of the country, and things like that. So I think it's just a very simple equation that this stuff is coming down the pipeline. There's some pretty troubling people sniffing around power that if they got the chance, they would change it around for me too. And I mean, and also just hopefully maybe a bit of old fashioned solidarity. But I think that I don't think that that is such a marked issue on state lines, just because, if it can happen there, it can happen here.
So what's your view of the effect of abortion direct amendments on this election? Because there are so many of these amendments in various states. Do you think that they could move the needle generally in those states? Or do you think that Republicans, independents very much distinguish between an abortion ballot and the general election?
Yeah, so there's been some interesting reporting that came out this week on that. So there was a report that Democratic operatives in Arizona, and we're hearing through sort of ground campaigns, but also their pollsters were reporting back that the direct vote in Arizona on overturning abortion law is having some women report to them, well, I can vote on this particular amendment and then I can still vote Republican. So that's on the ballot in Arizona. It's to overturn the 15-week ban that was brought in, but then they get to vote for Trump and Carrie Lake as well. And I believe there's abortion ballot initiatives in Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New York, and South Dakota. So yeah, it is an interesting carve out. And again, I think just one of the many reasons why everyone is so reticent to really look to the polls for this current election, because there are so many factors. And, Arizona and Nevada could have some, pretty interesting effects in Senate races and potentially even in the Electoral College. So it seems like it's certainly something that people are considering. And I mean, I guess it would be really the dream situation for Trump, right? If he can just, he's been the only line he's really been able to stick to on the abortion stuff is, oh, it's a states' rights issue. Everyone wants it to be a states' rights issue. And if people can really overturn it on a state level and still vote for him, I mean, that's really the dream scenario for his campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I suppose the question is, even if these people come and vote the direct vote for the abortion amendment, but still vote for Republicans, it's still presumably going to drag some turnout from Democrats that might not have been dragged out before.
Oh, certainly. But I think it's just, when we're talking about everything seems such fine margins at the moment, and especially if these, there does seem to be a constituency of female voters who are a bit more keyed in, I think, and a bit more discerning than perhaps just the average voter. And it's, because this is such a female issue, that if these voters are able to thread the needle, it could potentially be that percent or two that's, could get someone like a Carrie Lake over the line. And that obviously there's going to be a lot of downstream effects for that. But I mean, like everything, who knows? But it's an interesting development. And if it's the kind of thing that Democrats, I think, have a pretty good ground campaign in Arizona. If it's the kind of thing that they're going to have some of their better people there. If it's the kind of thing that they're reporting back and their pollsters are reporting back, it's potentially something that their campaign should be taking quite seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're talking about these direct vote amendments, there's an interesting legal development in Florida. As you said, they're having their own direct vote about abortion. In Florida, it requires 60% to pass. And it looks like it's going to be so close. Like, it's going to be really, really close. And Ron DeSantis is not happy about this. He does not like this amendment at all. No, no, no. And at the moment, the pro-amendment side is running this ad here.
When I saw the tumor on the MRI, my first thought was, am I going to be able to see my daughter again? The doctors knew if I did not end my pregnancy, I would lose my baby, I would lose my life, and my daughter would lose her mom. Florida has now banned abortion, even in cases like mine. Amendment 4 is going to protect women like me. We have to vote yes.
Sorry to draw the curtain like this, Elle, but I just happened to be looking at the screen when you're watching that ad, and your face changed visibly during that ad, which you've probably seen before, and you've probably seen 50 of those kinds of ads, but it still obviously affected you when you were watching an ad. Do you find those ads particularly effective?
Yeah, I think they are. They're pretty moving. And like I said, I've just had a friend that's recently gone through a really, really traumatic time. And yeah, it is, it's one of those things you don't, I guess I tend to, as someone who works in media, think about politics a bit more abstractly. But, it is the kind of conversation that I have had with my girlfriends, because we live in a red state, about, what we would do if we're in certain situations, and what our, kind of have, we just kind of joke, oh, our healthcare plan is flying to Mexico. But, it is, it's obviously very real. And like I said, I no idea who's going to win. I do kind of feel like the momentum's with Trump. But again, I think that the fear and the rage of a lot of women, I have my doubts as to whether it's being accurately reflected in a lot of media and polling at the moment.
Yeah. We'll talk more about that in a sec, but just to continue on with the Florida ad, what happened was the Department of Health General Counsel in Florida, a guy by the name of John Wilson, sent a letter to the TV station that was airing that ad, warning them that they could be criminally charged for airing that ad. Why, you might ask? Because they said the ad campaign contained false information. That bit where she said Florida has now banned abortion even in cases like mine, they said that was not true, because they said Florida law allows abortion after 6 weeks if, quote, 2 physicians certify in writing that in reasonable medical judgment, the termination of the pregnancy is necessary to save the pregnant woman's life or avert a serious risk of substantial and irreversible physical impairment. And they say that that would apply to a woman being treated for stage 4 brain cancer. So they say that ad is a lie when she says it wouldn't, the ban applies to her treatment as well. They say, quote, the advertisement is not only false, it is dangerous. Women faced with pregnancy complications posing a serious risk of death or substantial and irreversible physical impairment may and should seek medical treatment in Florida. However, if they're led to believe that such treatment is unavailable under Florida law, such women could foreseeably travel out of state to seek emergency medical care, seek emergency medical care from unlicensed providers in Florida, or not seek emergency medical care at all. Therefore, Wilson wrote, the Department of Health is, quote, authorized to institute criminal proceedings in the county court, and that keeping or maintaining a nuisance injurious to health is a second-degree misdemeanor. They might go, hang on, what's the charge here? What would you charge people with? And the answer is, they say it breaks Florida's law against sanitary nuisance. And that law prohibits the commission of any act by which the health and lives of individuals may be endangered. And they say since that ad breaks that law, the general manager of a TV station could go to jail for up to 60 days if he airs that ad again. What do you think of that, Elle?
I mean, just there's very little to say. Just more classic DeSantis. I think the country categorically showed that no one likes him. I don't really think he has much of a future, but he could still be a nuisance, is perhaps the politest way you can say to people in his state.
A sanitary nuisance, maybe. Yes.
Yeah, well, yes, very much so. Especially when he eats pudding with, what was it? When he ate the pudding with his fingers.
Yes.
He is a sanitary nuisance.
Why didn't he go to jail for that? That's what I want to know.
That's right.
And you boldly predict, Elle, we'll be seeing moves like this from your governor in the next few years. So we'll undoubtedly be talking. Yeah.
Well, he's the 10 Commandments guy now, Jeff Landry. Yeah. He's the one that's bringing that Supreme Court case. So yeah, he's just going to push DeSantis aside in the next year or two. Is my fearless prediction.
Sure. Okay, let me tell you what I think about this one. I think that the law is bullshit. That's what I think. The statute, the sanitary nuisance statute, normally deals with issues like untreated or improperly treated human waste, the keeping of diseased animals, the causing of any condition capable of breeding flies, mosquitoes, or other arthropods capable of transmitting diseases. They're all in the actual legislation, the things I just read out. It does include the phrase, or any other condition determined to be a sanitary nuisance. Any other condition seems like a massive stretch to me. Let's say this though. It's possible that the exceptions to Florida law, like they read out, do apply to the lady with brain cancer. It's possible. What they're saying is true. But you know what? It's possible that it doesn't as well. Let me tell you why. Florida's Agency for Healthcare Administration has advised that abortion is permitted after 6 weeks of pregnancy only if there is, quote, an immediate threat to the pregnant person's life and it would save their life. Was the threat to Caroline's life immediate? Maybe, maybe not. Would it have saved her life, the treatment? Or would it just prolong her life for a little bit of time before she died anyway? Maybe, maybe not. What's a court going to say? We don't know. That's the problem. It's the uncertainty that screws people around with these kinds of laws. We've said this over and over again. Floridians protecting freedom quoted a doctor in their court case, because they immediately went to court about this one, went to a court case. The doctor said that she would not have performed an abortion on Caroline, the brain cancer woman, out of fear of coming under criminal scrutiny. She said, quote, while the termination was medically necessary because the cancer was terminal, the abortion would not have saved her life and therefore could be illegal under Florida law. It's the uncertainty. You just don't know. And when you don't know, that paralyzes the doctors and it turns exceptions into non-exceptions. That's the problem. So, do you have any comments on that before I go on?
No, keep going.
Okay. So what's happened since then is that guy who wrote that letter, John Wilson, the general counsel for the Florida Department of Health, he's resigned because he had the shits with it. He so disagreed with that letter that he sent that he just didn't want to do it anymore. He said, he swore under oath that DeSantis' office directed him to send that letter. And he didn't write the letter. It was a pre-written letter that they handed to him to send out under his name, which he strongly disagreed with. But he said there was no argument. There was no discussion at all. They just gave him the letter and said, hand it out. And then they gave him a bunch more letters to send to other people and said, hand them out as well. And after he handed down the first one, he thought, I've had enough of this. So then he quit rather than hand out any more of those letters. He said, a man is nothing without his conscience. Then it went to court. He became part of the court case against them, against the Florida Department of Health. And the federal court slapped DeSantis down hard. U.S. District Court Judge Mark Walker placed an injunction on the state from punishing TV general managers airing their ads. It was just a temporary restraining order until the case could be heard in court, but he was pretty clear which way this one was going. The quote was, there is no general exception to the First Amendment for false statements. Falsity alone does not bring speech outside the First Amendment, absent some other traditionally recognized legally cognizable harm, since it's perilous to permit the state to be the arbiter of truth. Hear, hear. And he said, to keep it simple, for the state of Florida, it's the First Amendment, stupid. That's a quote from him. So that is a good result. But it's an important note about the government wanting to censor misinformation at all. The First Amendment applies to bad causes as well as to good causes. It applies to bad faith arguments as well as good faith arguments. So what that judge was saying is the next time around, then we're talking about, say, COVID, or we're talking about something where the shoe's on the other foot, and it's the Democrats who are in charge of the government trying to slap down false ads and false statements, which some would call misinformation. The First Amendment stops that as well. So take the win, I would say, on this occasion, because there will be other circumstances in the not too distant future where some of the liberals celebrating this won't be celebrating, I would suggest. But anyway, what's your view about this all?
I think, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, these kind of First Amendment free speech issues are, a handy cudgel, depending on which side of government that you're in at the time. But yeah, it's like everything in America, right? Be careful what you wish for.
Yes. So, okay, so let's just talk about abortion generally then, before we move on.
Yeah.
In your view, how is the abortion issue playing? Because look, I was expecting, I said this on PEP, I need to own up when I'm wrong. Back in June, I think, July, they launched the first of their Donald Trump did this ads, where they showed a scenario where a woman had a horrific experience. I don't remember what the example was. There are so many horror stories in this world. A horrific experience, and the ad ended with it fading to black as we heard the woman sobbing as it faded to black, and it just had in writing, Donald Trump did this. And I thought, right, that is an insight into the next 6 months. We are going to see ad after ad after ad ending with Donald Trump did this. And I haven't seen many of those ads. It's not as all-encompassing as I was expecting. So my question to you, as someone who actually lives in America, is, am I wrong? Is it more all-encompassing than it seems from Australia? Number one. And number two, is it a big issue just under the surface? Even if no one's talking about it in the national media, even if it's not getting the headlines, is it just stewing? And are we going to find in 2 weeks' time, we went, well, this was the abortion election after all?
I mean, I'm always reticent to make projections, but I think it is still a much bigger issue. And like I said, I think just there's some structural reasons why it's just maybe not getting as much play or it's not showing up in things. But again, like I think as we saw in the midterms, it was an issue that perhaps people didn't really grasp so much, just the sense of urgency and fear and rage that's coming from women about it. And like I said, it's just something that, that people talk about. People will always say here, Black friends will always say there's a thing that in the community you have to have the talk with young men when they reach about 12, which is, how you are probably going to be treated differently around police, how you have to be very careful. These are the things that you do, if you get pulled over. It's just a thing called the talk. And I think that women are having their own version of the talk now amongst themselves. Like I said, it just comes up when you're having drinks with your girlfriends that this is what I would do, or this is my plan, if I do have some sort of emergency. And so, yeah, I think that the idea is out there, and that there is going to be some, there will probably be a bit more motivation than is being captured in the polls, is my guess. But again, there are so many things up for grabs in this election, and there's still we're still in October surprise territory. A war, an oil, an extension of the current war in the Middle East, an oil shock, things like that could change everything. But my suspicion is that it is an issue that's not being accurately reflected so far.
Something you just said then, I'm just going to go off the path for a second. I should play the Tangent Treehouse theme.
Whee!
I love that theme. You were talking about the talk from that Black people get about dealing with the police. There is this is a bit of a policy time as well. I don't want to ask Lockie at 5 a.m. to combine the policy time and Tangent Treehouse. Don't do it, Lockie. But there's a policy which has gotten almost no play whatsoever in this election, at least that I know of. Maybe it's micro-targeted, but not on the national level, which I find really surprising, given that Donald Trump is making such a concerted play for young Black men. Did you know that Donald Trump has a policy for stop and frisk to be employed in every single city?
I did not, but it sounds on brand.
Yeah, back in May, he said that he was going to control police funding based on whether they have stop and frisk. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, stop and frisk was a strategy that New York employed about 10, 15 years ago, where
Giuliani, it was a Giuliani policy, wasn't it?
Maybe it was a bit later. Yeah, maybe it was 25 years ago. Yeah, whatever. It was. I didn't prepare for it. This was going to be I was going to do this at some other time, but you just brought it up. I thought, I might as well do it right now. And it lasted for about 10, 15 years. And then it was extremely unpopular in New York, because what happened was the people who were stopped and frisked is meant to be just stopping, frisking random people to make sure they're not carrying guns or drugs or whatever. And it's not about actually finding guns and drugs so much as just telling them there's a chance that you're going to get frisked, to try and discourage them from carrying guns and drugs. And from memory, it wasn't terribly successful necessarily. I don't think there's much evidence, scientific evidence, that this in particular made a big impact on crime. But there's a lot of evidence that this in particular targeted black people a lot, and that black people were stopped and frisked at a much higher rate than non-black people, and Hispanic people were stopped and frisked at a higher rate than white people, and I don't think black people love that. I don't think they enjoy that at all. I don't think young black men enjoy the idea of stop and frisk one little bit. And so the fact that that is Trump's policy, I would have thought would have got mentioned once or twice. And in fact, I saw a Super PAC ad 2 weeks ago about this very topic from a tiny little Super PAC that no one's heard of, that has no money and wasn't going to air anywhere. It was this ad.
What do you think about stop and frisk?
I think it leads to police harassing innocent people, black people mostly.
I will insist that local jurisdictions return to proven common sense policing measures, such as stop and frisk.
Most of the people the NYPD stop and search are men, and 97% of them are black and Hispanic.
Have you ever been stopped and frisked?
Well, you want me to go into it, or?
Have you ever been stopped and frisked?
Yeah.
Now I ask you, surely that is an issue. I'm sure they know about it. I don't know what the logic is. Surely there's an issue that Democrats should have mentioned once or twice in the last couple of months, at least micro-targeted black men about it. Surely.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like the kind of thing you could micro-target. But again, it is my fear with that kind of very corporate, let the adults be in charge kind of Democrat HQ ethos, that they will say, oh, well, they'll just come back and say that we're soft on crime. And it's going to be hit on us again. But yeah, it seems like it could be a worthwhile strategy. Just very quickly, I have slandered Rudolph Giuliani. Yes. It was a Mike Bloomberg policy. Okay. I know that Rudy's a bit short of cash at the moment, so I don't want him to sue me for defamation, because I imagine obviously he's an hour 2 to 3 pepper kind of guy who'd still be hanging on every word right now.
Without doubt, Rudy, I know you're an avid pepper. If you want to make money, don't sue us, mate. There is no money here to be found.
The mug fund, that Scrooge McDuck style pond of money that you're currently jumping into from mug sales is all going to our Rudy.
It's ironic that you mentioned the mug fund. We'll be talking about that a little bit later on in the Unleashed. There's a funny story about that, but I don't want to tease it. We'll see. Okay, one aside. As predicted, this whole podcast is blowing out. It's going to be incredibly long. But one aside about abortion before we move on, about Trump and what he refers to as post-birth abortion. He loves talking about that. What he means by that is when a fetus has some defect, that means they're unlikely to live, and they're born for whatever reason, but they're not going to survive without intervention for very long. The doctor and the mother agree to not intervene, to keep the baby alive, knowing it will be dying soon anyway, and any intervention is likely to be distressing for both the baby and the mother, so they make the baby comfortable and they allow the baby to die of natural causes. There's a name for that. It's called perinatal palliative care, which I didn't know about, and so I stumbled into that accidentally about 5 PEPs ago. I learned all about it. Now I learned one more thing about it, which I didn't know, and I'm not sure many people would know this. This is what I learned this week. Perinatal palliative care has a history. It used to be the preferred option for pro-lifers. Americans United for Life created a policy guide and model legislation, not in 1972, back in 2018, demanding that mothers be informed about the option for perinatal palliative care before they're allowed to have an abortion. It was one of the impediments before you could have an abortion. You had to learn about perinatal palliative care as an option instead of abortion. The argument was that this was letting nature take its course, allowing God to do his work, while causing less distress for the mother, theoretically. Now, incidentally, there's been research into this since then, which has suggested that the psychological outcomes for the mother of either getting a late-term abortion or opting for perinatal palliative care is basically the same. It doesn't make a difference either way. I mean, they don't love either scenario because they don't love having a baby that they were looking forward to raising, having a fatal genetic disorder. There's no winners in that scenario, right? So there's distress either way. Apparently it's the same. But that was their argument until only a few years ago. In fact, as recently as last year, that was the argument for a lot of pro-lifers. Only last year, Kate Cox in Texas, you might remember this case. We talked about this on PEP. She was suing to have the right to get an abortion when her baby in Texas had trisomy 18. And she was denied that right. She had to go have an abortion elsewhere. Texas Right to Life, at the time, when her court case was going on, said that her child was uniquely precious and that the compassionate approach to these heartbreaking diagnoses is perinatal palliative care, which honors rather than ends the child's life. But now, in red states, women have no choice but to have those births. So perinatal palliative care, it isn't an alternative to abortion anymore. There's no abortion to be an alternative. So pro-life groups have totally dropped those arguments now. They're not trying to convince people to not have abortions. And they're allowing Trump to vilify the entire process that they supported until very recently, purely for political reasons. So I didn't know about that, and that sucks. Did you know about that?
I did not, but yeah, that is that sucks.
Just before, there was one other thing you wanted to talk about. So let's just do that, and then we'll go into the Elon section. You had a section where you wanted to talk about, at one point in time, whether TV ads work. So let me be unsubtle with no segue whatsoever. Elle, did TV ads work?
Okay, so I mean, this is kind of going back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. I'm kind of obsessed with how and why TV ads work because they're annoying. They're saturated. A friend of mine was recently up in Pennsylvania in his mother's final days of life. And so he's sitting in the hospital, as you do, kind of just with the TV on. And he just said every single ad was super PACs, political campaigns. And yeah, so I've just been really obsessed with, I mean, who's actually watching TV? Who is being moved by this stuff? So yeah, I was doing some research, and there's been a University of California at Berkeley study, which I'm a little, it's some guys who used to work for a Democratic Party affiliated group called Swayable that kind of measures this stuff. So impartiality, you know, but they are academics, and it was published in a political science journal. So they've basically found that some ads can be up to twice as effective as others. But the kicker is no one can ever really find out why. And even trends in different cycles, for example, from 2018 midterms to 2020 general election, ads that worked in the 2018, the same types of ads didn't work in 2020. You know, for example, they found that having a woman as the messenger in ads had more impact in 2020 on the actual presidential race, but didn't really mean anything in down ballot races. So it's all very, very messy. Basically, I think the really interesting thing is that campaigns basically just have to keep on testing ads. And it tends to be completely sort of unique to each cycle. And I mean, obviously, this is where I have some reservations because a political testing company would say that.
Yes, they would.
And yeah, and I mean, I think part of the thing is as well that they say, people report that it has influenced them, but, you know, also how do we know that it has motivated them to vote when they wouldn't have, or motivated them to change their vote? I mean, how are you ever going to effectively measure that? But there's also been some further research I was looking into by Kellogg Institute, I think it is. And they are still claiming that positive ads have more effect than negative ads. And again, this is all very dependent on the situation and who you're targeting. But they believe that if you go back to the 2000 election, everyone's favorite election, if they only allowed for positive ads, it would have increased voter turnout by 2%. And only airing negative ads would have decreased voter turnout by about 1.5%, which would have been a gap of 10 million voters. And again, this is all quite hypothetical, but it just is interesting because there's clearly something that there is value that campaigns see in this stuff, right? That people still continue to fundraise and to pepper with ads so much. It's just that no one knows actually what's working. I think it's just throw as much shit as you can at the wall and see what sticks. But it has just interested me because there was so much made of the money gap between Clinton and Trump in 2016, and that Trump got so much earned media, as it's called, when we're things like going to the McDonald's and just how much airplay he's getting that Harris and Clinton and Biden have just never been able to match. And again, I think that is because he's just such a unique candidate. And a DeSantis or a Don Jr., I don't think are ever going to be able to garner that kind of attention. But yeah, I just found it really interesting that they know that there is some persuadability, that the fact that Trump isn't just relying on earned media, that his campaign, and as we'll go into next, Elon and those kind of PACs behind him still really are going hard on advertising. And that what we have seen is that the 29 million they say has been spent on that particular anti-trans ad targeting Kamala. You can see how spooked her campaign is by it now. So it is, I just find it really fascinating how that stuff moves the needle. And the essential answer is that no one quite knows, but it does something.
I was going to say, even if that's true, that the positive ads drive turnout in a way the negative ads don't, that doesn't really matter, does it? The question is how many more votes you get than the other person. If you're driving down more of their turnout than your turnout, then you win. If you're driving up more of their turnout than your turnout, you lose. So more turnout is not necessarily good, and less turnout is not necessarily bad.
Exactly. And I think it just goes into, there's a vibes ecosystem, right? And it's a bit like something going viral. It's turning something into a meme. It's like no one knows what the formula is to do it, but it's when it taps into a wider truth that people can just kind of sense, and it's just encapsulated in like a really neat little package that people go, oh, okay, yeah, that resonates with me. But again, whether something resonates with someone, whether it changes their vote, whether it gets them to vote when they otherwise wouldn't, there's just still so many unknowns. It's not like door knocking, for example, when, so many things always show that door knocking makes a difference. Going to people's houses, which I don't understand. If someone's coming to my house, I don't want to talk to you. There are so many unknowns in the world of TV advertising that no one can ever quite get their finger on.
Okay, let's talk about, as you flagged, the money machine that is Elon Musk. There's so many things we could talk about here. His role as Trump's propaganda minister, his petition /rallies /$1 million / jail sentence potentially, his super PACs and their ground game, his super PACs and their dirty tricks, the betting machine that he's loosely associated with. What do you want to talk about? Where do you want to start?
I mean, I guess maybe to start with the petition and the rallies.
Okay, let's do that.
So yeah, so he's been he's spending all of his time in Pennsylvania at the moment.
Literally all his time. He's camped there.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so finally so he has been offering inducements to voters. I think it started out at $47.
Yes.
There's some other things he said $100.
It's
get people to register.
It's $47 for swing states that aren't Pennsylvania. It's $100 for Pennsylvania, and it's $0 for if you're not in the swing state.
So getting people, inducing them to vote or register, I think was the initial claim, and he's getting around the very obvious illegality of paying people to vote in a certain manner by saying that it is to sign a petition for the First and Second Amendment, but you have to be registered to vote in order to sign that, which is where things get a little bit murky. And then he's also offering a daily bounty of $1 million for anyone who's registered to vote, who has signed this petition. So far, all of those people have been registered Republicans who have won this very, very legal and upstanding ballot. And I mean, again, I wonder if that'd be something a state lottery commission might need to look into. I know that, there's normally regulation of lotteries. It seems like, flipping that coin and every time it's coming up heads might be something else for the regulators. But a lot of legal experts have been weighing in publicly and saying this is very, very murky ground and seems to me to be quite illegal. So finally, the Justice Department's Public Integrity Unit, who look after elections, sent a strongly worded letter to Musk saying that he is potentially in violation. That was a day or two ago.
Has he responded?
Not that I'm aware of, but it's classic Musk behavior, right? He likes to be on the edge because he thinks he's an edgelord, but also he very clearly has that. And it's, just a very billionaire Silicon Valley kind of ethos that is, it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. But to me, it seems pretty likely as well that he would like this controversy to be stoked.
Of course he would.
I mean, he just likes being in the news and being a player, but he gets to say that he's being muzzled by the deep state, and
they're
the election interference.
And they're trying to stop him handing out millions of dollars to working class people.
Exactly, and I would like to see all of those checks because he's very good at promising these sorts of things and not delivering. It's very, very, very Trumpy in that sense. But I mean, it also feeds into some other things that we'll talk about. But he seems very clearly laying groundwork for Stop the Steal too in the event that the Trump campaign does not win. That this putting all these things. Putting all these markers along the way of this is stolen from us. And there is I kind of get the sense that in some ways he'd kind of prefer a Stop the Steal than an outright Trump win. I mean, I think he just likes chaos. He's got that kind of engineer gene that, let's just turn the knob and see what this thing does. But also, I mean, he's very clearly, is not a huge fan of democracy and the current order. And I think he would like, for it to be disrupted in Silicon Valley terms.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think he'd probably argue that he'd say he's all about defending democracy, but I suppose it's what kind of democracy is the question. The kind of democracy where you're handing out millions of dollars to people to register, that's a very different kind of democracy to the kind of democracy I've come to appreciate over time. Just on the question of whether it's legal or not, I've been trying so hard to try and find a loophole. That's the way my sort of lawyer brain works, going, okay, what's the argument that he can run? And let me read you what the petition says. This is the offer in the petition, and then I'll hone in on something. The First and Second Amendments guarantee freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. By signing below, I am pledging my support for the First and Second Amendments. In appreciation for your support, you'll receive $47 for each registered voter you refer that signs this petition. Our goal is to get 1 million registered voters in swing states to sign in support of the Constitution, especially freedom of speech and the right to bear arms. That's all good. Getting other people to register, no problems. You can pay them to get other people to register. That's fine. This is the next bit. This program is exclusively open to registered voters in Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina. Okay, this program is exclusively open to registered voters. So the program is only for registered voters. What's the program? Is the program signing the petition? Is it something else? We assume that they mean sign the petition. I think that is a rational argument to make. I mean, there's no doubt they're talking about signing the petition, but when they get in court, are they going to try and argue something else? That the program is different to signing the petition. You can sign the petition without being registered, but to be part of the $100 program, to be part of the program where the other guy gets paid for registering you, you need to be registered. Like, the program could be any number of things. And like, that's bush lawyering, but that's the kind of thing I think you need to come up with, because it seems so obviously illegal. And it's anyway, so I just flag that. That's the only loophole that I could potentially see in a court. What is the program? The next bit is in terms of the actual law. Oh, we should play what Elon said about the $1 million.
So I have a surprise for you, which is that we're going to be awarding $1 million to randomly to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election.
Okay, so you had to have signed the petition to win the $1 million. There's no doubt about that. No wriggle room. The law says, Section 52 of the USC 10307C, whoever pays or offers to pay or accepts payment either for registration to vote or for voting shall be fined not more than $10,000 or imprisoned not more than 5 years, or both. So if he is inducing with payment people registering, that's illegal. If signing the petition requires registration and you need to do that, to register, to be eligible for the $1 million, then that is inducing them to register. That's against the law. But it's just a lottery. It's not an actual payment. Oh, yeah? The DOJ Election Crimes Manual Act 44 says the bribe may be anything having monetary value, including cash, liquor, lottery chances, and welfare benefits such as food stamps. For an offer or payment to violate Section 10307C, which I just read out you before, it must have been intended to induce or reward the voter for engaging in one or more acts necessary to cast a ballot. So is his intention to induce registration? Of course it is. He talks about it constantly. I don't think he can get out of that. In which case he's broken the law. So I don't know. Apart from that loophole I said, I can't see how he could possibly escape that. And by the way, look, I know that he probably wants to get busted because it'll give him good publicity. Like, he wants the publicity. He said when he announced that $1 million thing, he's looking for publicity. And even if he was busted, he'd be busted by the Federal Election Commission. It'll take him years for the case to come up. They'll end up tying anyway because they're 3-all, Democrat and Republican. And even if he was fined for $50,000, why does he care? He just gave away $1 million. So it's just frustrating. I don't think it's going anywhere. You got any other thoughts on that before we move on to the next Elon Musk item?
No, but I mean, I think we can possibly tie it in a little bit to the ground game issue.
Yes, move on.
Which is the next on the agenda.
Go for it.
Which, well, okay, so we'll go into this. So Rolling Stone reported this week that Trump has outsourced a lot of his ground game to Musk's America PAC.
Yes.
And I know you spoke about earlier this year they'd outsourced a lot of it to Charlie Kirk's PAC as well.
They had.
So I'm not sure how the division is actually working, but they seem like they're certainly, the America PAC is amping up ground game in some of the battleground states.
They stripped back. They stripped back a bit of Charlie Kirk, so now he's only doing a couple of very small areas. It's basically the America PAC now.
Okay, right. That makes a lot of sense. And some senior Republican figures have been briefing journalists that they think, it's not doing very well. There's very little presence on the ground. There was some talk a couple of weeks ago about inflating numbers and people saying that they knocked on doors that they hadn't done. And also, quite interestingly, that Elon this PAC has employed a lot of ex-Ron DeSantis people, which isn't going down well with Trump's people, and obviously some other figures in the GOP. They've still got things like open job postings, which again, 2 weeks before a campaign just feels like malpractice. Just get those roles filled. And also, there's been ongoing rumblings. I mean, Trump has made it very clear he's said a lot of things in the past that he hates Elon Musk. He said that he thinks his cars are, electric cars are bullshit, which is, generally what Trump thinks about renewables. But, he said something, I think it was last year or 2022, that if he told Elon Musk to get on the floor and beg, he would have.
Yeah.
And apparently, but behind the scenes, he's been saying that Musk is boring, weird, and annoying, which all sounds highly credible to me because he is. But it all really seems to be, I mean, it is interesting, that it just speaks to the chaos, right, of the Trump campaign, which has always been there, that they just have to, any port in a storm, this guy that they hate and they think is dumb and annoying, they're just outsourcing ground game to him because they have to, because they're not organized themselves. But it really feels to me like Elon Musk is going to be in the absolute firing line if Trump doesn't get elected, that he's going to blame a lot of stuff on him. And I mean, as we just saw in that clip that you played, have you ever seen someone announce, I'm going to give away $1 million to someone in a more uncharismatic, unexciting manner?
Yeah.
And genuinely, I think that there is a little bit of a weird factor about Musk, that he's uncharismatic, he's unlikable. He's like Richie Rich, right? He has to buy friends. His mum jumps in on Twitter when people are making fun of him. His mum comes in and tells him to stop making fun of him online. He's just a very weird dude, and I don't think that his intervention in the race, unless it's suddenly just throwing so much money that this ground game stuff is going to stick, I don't see in any way that his intervention in the race is going to be a great positive for the Trump campaign. But what do you think?
Well, for the record, Elon, I know that you're a pepper in the 1 hour or 2 hours that you're listening triple speed to this podcast. When you're not working 22 hours a day, I know you listen. I just want you to know, Elon, just between you and me, as a fellow Aspie, I don't find you either boring or weird. I do find you annoying, though. You are annoying, but I like the uncharismatic behavior you're describing, Elle. I recognize it. I recognize it so much, and I'm gonna be the last person who's gonna criticize it. The little mumbling and the looking down. I spent a lot of years not being like that. So I
jumping up, doing the X.
Yeah, I recognize it, getting overexcited and then becoming exhausted. I understand. I understand it entirely, Elon. So I'm going to tread carefully in that respect. But yeah, you are annoying. I'm sorry, mate. The answer to your question, though, about what I think about this whole thing. First of all, I 100% agree with you that Trump is going to blame Elon Musk if he loses. There's no doubt. He's given him so much rope that makes him a really easy figure to blame if it just doesn't work out. In terms of the ground game, Elon Musk is not someone who should be running ground game. I know he's put $75 million into the super PAC. He has no experience. This stuff is the hardest part of politics. You need to find the people that you will not reach otherwise. If you don't, because no point going up to people who are going to vote by themselves anyway. You're wasting time if you go up to them. You need to find the people who are reachable, but if you don't reach them, they won't vote. They're really hard people to find. There's a real art to it, and you need to be able to convince them, and you need to be able to do what you need to get them to vote as efficiently as possible so you can move on to the next person. It's really hard, and it takes a lot of pre-work because you need to get them to vote early so you can get them out of the way, so you can focus on next one. Hiring people with 2 weeks to go, the horse is bolted, sunshine. It's too late. So he is the wrong person to be doing this job. And it is, if Trump blames Elon, that's a cop-out because it's Trump's fault for being cheap and for not paying for it himself months ago. In fact, the RNC were going to do it until he sacked them and replace them with Lara, right? So that is the way, that is the fruits of his labor. Every now and then he gets a comeuppance for being him. And this would be a comeuppance. If he lost by the margin of ground game, it would be Trump's fault. Yeah. And by the way, when you're saying that there's doubt about some people, whether they actually knocked on the doors, there is a video online where people coach the people who are doing the ground game for Elon Musk how to dodge their app. It's actually online. You can all watch it if you want, right? Because they're using this app called Campaign Sidekick, which is counting where they're door knocking, and it only works when they ironically have internet connections. Hello, Starlink, Elon. Why don't you give them Starlink? But if they don't have 5G reception, it doesn't work. And so they then use the video that's online that teaches them how to dodge it to lie. And apparently in Arizona and Nevada, they know of about 25% of door knocks being fake. That's what they know about. God knows how many they don't know about. Their target at the beginning of all this was 450,000 door knocks, people contacted before the election. They're saying, we're not going to reach that target. Harris's campaign passed 600,000 people contacted last week and miles ahead. And they're not going to get, Elon's team ain't going to get near 450,000. So that's going to make a huge difference. So yeah, this is a real issue, I think. I mean, now the ground game might only mean 0.5% difference, but once again, let's see on election day whether that 0.5% makes the difference or not. There's going to be a lot of things competing for what will make the difference on election day, I suspect. So I think the ground game is just a terrible mistake. And Elon Musk has been extremely self-indulgent by trying to relive his youth, his wasted youth when people used to bully him or whatever the hell happened. I can only imagine what happened to him when he was in high school, because I know what happened to me when I was in high school. So I can only imagine what happened to him, because I'm better than him as far as dealing with other people goes. It's sad that he is using this election campaign as a means to make himself feel like he's popular by paying people millions of dollars. It makes me depressed, and it's not what democracy should be about, and I don't like it. But I don't find you either boring or weird, Elon. I just want you to know.
Yeah, just on Campaign Sidekick, I've just been trying to find it, but I did see a quote from a Republican strategist a week or so ago, and they said something like, "We stopped using Campaign Sidekick in like 2014 because we just knew it's dodgy. Like you should not be using it, basically." And I think it just, I mean, for all of my talking down the kind of Democrat machine, you know, this is how you run campaigns, adults are in charge kind of thing. For stuff like ground game, you need machine people. You need people who know how to do this stuff. And you can't just say, well, you know, we're going to get outsiders to do this stuff. We're going to do it differently. There is a reason why people are professionals at this stuff. And this is the kind of stuff that works. And you need people who know how to do this, who've done it before, who are local. I mean, that was one of the big failures of Hillary's campaign was, you know, some people in Michigan, I think particularly, that they just weren't using on the ground people who knew stuff, who were trying to flag to the party a long time out. There are problems here. Things are different. Like, this is one of those things you absolutely need expertise in. And Elon thinking he can do it better, he can do it cheaper, he can do it faster. Yeah, sorry, dude, not going to happen.
You need the people that the RNC had before they sacked them and replaced them with people who are employed to stop the steal. Trump has made his entire campaign strategy revolve around Stop the Steal Part 2. He's got endless election watchers and election challengers and people for the post-election period. He's got them all sewn up, and they were the people that he invested in instead of the people to do ground game. And then Elon took over. Once again, I don't blame Elon for trying to help out, because there was no one else doing it at that point in time. The problem was there was no one else doing it. Like, Trump should not have sacked the professionals. That was a mistake.
I'll quickly talk about Pollymarket, because again, it feeds into the what we've sort of been talking about, which is laying the groundwork for Stop the Steal 2.
Yeah.
And I'm convinced that Pollymarket is a part of it. So it's a crypto betting market.
Yeah.
That have had some stuff bubbled up this week that a whale, so like a big gambler, placed around $30 million worth of bets on Trump winning the election. And this has pushed the probability on this crypto betting exchange of Trump winning to 64%. And I think, as Dave's explained before, and for stuff that is kind of over my head, but I kind of get it, that the betting probability market, even though people like to look at it, is still very far removed from actual polling and is highly manipulatable, which this has shown. There has been a bit of trouble in that apparently US citizens or people in the US can't actually legally bet on this exchange, even though they clearly do. And just today, Pollymarket has come out and said, "Oh no, it's some guy in France has been betting on it," or perhaps an American with a VPN that they geolocated to France. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, this does seem a lot to me like if you were a interested billionaire who had a lot of spare money lying around, that it's the kind of thing you might do because, to say that if the election doesn't go in your way, that, see, look, all the betting markets were saying this, and I just feel like it's the kind of thing that obviously, I mean, it's just a bet that they'd like to win anyway, whoever it is that's placed this. But it also, I do wonder if it's part of saying, well, of trying to launch this quite bizarre case of why Trump is unimpeachably, the elected candidate, and why the election might have been rigged or stolen against them.
I had an alternative theory about this, about the betting market, and just so people understand what we're talking about here. Until very recently, the betting markets were about 50-50, and then they blew out to 60-40 seemingly overnight. And now, and people go, "Oh, well, that's interesting." Oh, and a lot of conservatives online have used that as evidence how well Trump is going. So it's boosted their confidence. Now, I couldn't help noticing my alternative theory, which I'm not sure I still have. My alternative theory was that Elon Musk tweeted about Pollymarkets when the odds were 51-48 to Trump. He tweeted out, "Trump now leading Kamala by 3% in betting markets, more accurate than polls as actual money is on the line." And he tweeted out the link to Pollymarkets. Almost immediately after that, it became 60-40. And conservatives interpreted that as saying it was because of Kamala's Fox News interview. Like Zero Hedge wrote, after Kamala's Fox News interview, Trump's victory odds surge above 61%. I was thinking maybe Elon Musk caused the spike by tweeting about Pollymarkets. He has a huge influence amongst online conservatives. He just said Pollymarkets is the best test of Trump winning. It makes sense that his acolytes would try to rig that test. That's what people online do. That's what trolls do.
Oh,
right?
Totally. Yeah. I'm with you. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I thought maybe rather than him or someone he knows or someone involved with the Trump campaign or Republicans was a whale just betting big to manipulate the odds, it was just simply the power of Elon Musk's tweet as a little flag attracting heaps of bets from the Twitterati. And that is what happened. That was my theory. But there is one thing that undermines that theory a little bit, which is Real Clear Politics has an index of betting markets as well as polls. And they have 8 markets, betting markets on their, or betting companies on their, in their index. All of them, when I looked last night, the average was 59%. All of them were between 57 and 61%, and Pollymarkets was 59%, right in the middle. So it's not just Pollymarkets; they're all moving in the same way. Now, maybe because of Elon Musk's tweet, it's attracting bets across the board. People are going where there's value, and they're trying to boost Trump because they think it will help him with the odds, but they're doing it in a way that will maximize their value. So they go to the lowest odds. And so maybe it is still a function of Elon Musk's publicity of betting that is driving all the betting companies up. It's possible. But I was just, it wasn't as neat as I thought it would be. I thought it'd be really neat that Pollymarkets went up just as soon as he tweeted about it, and that was it. But it seems to be a marketing. So maybe the market is just conservative. maybe these people are Republican. Like, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if online young men, who are obviously the people who are doing the betting, favor Trump and are enthusiastic about Trump and bet accordingly. That would make sense as well. It might be just a reflection of a demographic. I don't know. So that's my take on it. I'm confused about what it means, and I'm not sure it means anything. But one thing I'm sure about is it doesn't mean that Trump is necessarily just streaking away like they're acting. It does. By the way, just so you know, for people who don't understand how these things work, if the betting market says 60%, that doesn't mean he's going to get 60%. That means he's got a 60% chance, which is slightly better than 50% chance. That's a 60% chance of getting one vote more. Not he's going to get 60%. Just because I've had a lot of people tweeting at me and writing and posting at me going, "Oh, Trump's ahead by 20 points." No, he's not. Anyway, so that's my take on all that.
Yeah, look, I'm with you on the theory, and I think you expressed it better than I did. Like, I'm not saying this is an out and out conspiracy. A lot of people have sort of said, yeah, that it feels like something Musk would do. And I don't think it is, just like I sort of said, it's a laying the groundwork, but I think it is this. I think there's an ecosystem of people who are so convinced that Trump is going to win that they're putting their money where their mouth is. They believe that betting markets are more accurate than polling because, polling's often done by mainstream media. And I think it just comes with the very helpful side fact that if Trump doesn't win, and they are, convincing themselves, a lot of people, that the Democrats and the deep state are trying to steal this election, that this is part of the case for Trump having won regardless. So yeah, it's not as neat a kind of conspiracy as I might have sounded like I was pushing forward initially. I just think it's interesting, and it just feeds into a lot of that culture that we're seeing with the Elon Musk, the Peter Thiel, those kind of hedge fund guys that have kind of got really behind Trump. But very quickly, breaking news. I did want to circle back to something we spoke about hours ago.
Yes.
Is that Washington Post have come out and ended their practice of presidential endorsements. So they're not endorsing any candidate this year. So as I mentioned, that feels very Jeff Bezos saying that he doesn't that he fears retribution. And I mean, that's what's come out of the LA Times as well. So that seems kind of interesting.
Vindication.
Yeah.
Well done.
So for the first time since the 1980s, they won't be endorsing anyone.
There you go.
And yeah, the New York Times has just come out and endorsed Harris, saying it's the only patriotic choice. Shock horror. But yeah.
Who will we know who to vote for? Honestly, I'm at a loss. Elle, I know you need to go.
I have to go. I'm sorry, but I think we're clicking off right on 3 hours.
Yeah, look, there is so many more things I have to talk about. I know this is going to be a stupidly long PEP. I can't even imagine how long the Unleash is going to be, but we've only got another week to go, okay? So just strap yourself in. It's not going to hurt that much, I promise. I'll see you guys on the other side of White Flash. And Elle, thank you so much for all your time. Have a good election. We'll see you afterwards.
Yeah, we'll speak on the flip side maybe. And yeah, everyone send your flowers to Lockie. He's the real victim here.
He really is. Until after the White Flash, stay peppy. Welcome to the other side of the White Flash. This is Chaz Unleashed, and I have a lot planned, but I promise you now, I'm not going to record more than an hour. I am looking at the clock. I think a 4-hour podcast is enough. It's only a week till the election, okay? There's a lot to cram in. Let's see what I can get in here today. First of all, a few announcements. Yes, we are aware that the audio quality changes on the podcast that you have just been listening to at the 1 hour, 27 minute and 41 second mark. Lockie has been editing and he just told me, there we go, poor old Lockie. He's not looking happy. What's the time, Lockie? 7:15 a.m. How are you enjoying that, mate?
Another day in paradise.
He hasn't left yet. Good man, Lucky. Unfortunately, our SD card filled up at the 1 hour 27 minute 41, 1 hour 27 minute 41 second mark, and we didn't realise until there was about 1 minute left in the pod. And if you want to laugh, I will now play you the moment that we realised that we might have just conducted a 3-hour podcast without actually recording it. Just keep your eyes on Elle's face throughout this clip as she experiences creeping dread. The creeping dread we're all experiencing, but she showed it just that little bit more. It's quite funny. Enjoy.
Obvious. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Oh, look at this, see the betting markets, which are always right, agree with me, unlike the mainstream media, New York Times, whatever.
What's going on?
Did that just go to 0?
That says 0.
Did we press that? We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny in hindsight, at least. Anyway, we found some low-quality audio in the end, and I think it's okay. I think it's patched together all right, but yes, we know it's different. Merch, thank you so much to everyone who bought some merch. We're already improving the range and the quality because it was a bit ordinary. We bought some shirts for ourselves as well, and we didn't like them. We found them a bit scratchy. So I think, Lockie, are you still wearing your shirt? Here we go. Come on. Here we go. He's just got to take his jumper off. This is the proof. Oh, here's the shirt. I'm not going to put it on. You're about half my size.
You can hold it.
I can hold it. Here we go. There we go. See, we actually bought the shirts ourselves. We tried them. We found them scratchy, so we've already changed shirt suppliers to hopefully a better quality shirt. For those of you who already bought shirts, thank you for your support. And you've been rewarded for your promptness and for your encouragement with some, and your generosity with some extremely rare and exclusive shitty scratchy PEP shirts. There are only 193 of them in existence. Only 193 of them will ever be made. So you, my friends, are extremely elite. Seriously, folks, thank you for your support. We will continue to make improvements. That is what we do at PEP. We try to make up for our many, many mistakes. And we do it all the time because we make a lot of them. Like I said, we are already adding range in the products and options, and we will keep doing that every week for the foreseeable future. So do check into the shop every now and then, see if there's something you actually want. Please email in any suggestions or requests. We'll just keep on adding stuff. And yes, we do plan to be adding an energy polarizer soon. I've got mine right here. There you go. You will have noticed the prices in the shop have been moving around a little bit, maybe. Maybe you've noticed it, maybe you haven't. That was because when we first set the prices for some items like shirts and mugs, we were actually making a loss. In fact, when people ordered 2 mugs, and just 2 mugs, we were losing $15.05 originally. So we changed that price pretty quickly. We're going to continue to play around with suppliers and distributors as we mess with the quality and so forth, so that we may alter prices more over time. But basically, look, our rule is no item should be sold with a margin of more than $5. So we're not going to be ripping you guys off, except for when we sell energy polarizers. But some people told us the shipping costs are stacking on top of each other for if you buy more than one item. We are aware of that. And we are dealing with that as well. If you want to wait until we actually fix that before you order something, that's fine. Like I said, we're going to keep on improving. Back to the content. First of all, an update. I did a policy time on police immunity a few weeks back. I've got to give you an update because this is just incredible. Trump was asked about police immunity. I can't believe they asked him. That's so in the weeds. That's it. I thought I was the only person who cared about this topic. They asked him about it at the Fox Women's Town Hall. And he started off by saying that there's going to be some bad apple police officers. Yeah, but he'll give them all immunity anyway. Have a listen.
We'll see. And we're going to have law and order. We're going to We have to reinvigorate our police. We have great police. They're not allowed to do their job. If they do their job with gusto, which is what we want them to be fair. And you know, the sad thing is you'll always have a bad apple. And, you know, hundreds and hundreds of arrests, one bad arrest, and it's on the front page of every newspaper. And these people are incredible. They want to do their job, just like the Border Patrol. They want to do their job. We're going to let them do their job. And I'm going to give them immunity. We're going to protect them because they do things and they end up getting sued. They lose their family. They lose their house. They lose their pension. They lose everything.
And then he said that the bad apples somehow wouldn't be given immunity. So he's giving immunity to everyone, but somehow not giving immunity to the bad apples. I don't understand. Look, just listen to him.
The bad apples. Does that not incentivize anyone if you give everyone immunity to go after those people on forces that you need to deal with? So how do you balance
People know the bad apples, though. They do. 99% they're just hard. They want to stop crime. You will have you're going to have a bad police officer. And I've seen it where you have one, a couple of very famous
So immunity doesn't keep you from dealing with that?
No, because they're going to be some people you're going to say, we're not giving you immunity. What are you, crazy? Look what happened. Look what you've done. You've been terrible.
I'm really not sure Trump has thought through this policy very much. He's not very good at improvising policy. I guess the joke is on me because I keep on taking his policy seriously enough to do policy times on them. I want to talk about crime rates. This is something that very few people have talked about. The press has basically not covered this story at all, and I think it is to their detriment because crime is a big issue in this election, and it's something that the nominees have been arguing about with dueling statistics, and one of the statistics has changed. First of all, I want to do a recap of the situation with crime rates because I have explained this to you probably about a month ago now, but I don't expect anyone to remember, and it's very complicated. I'll do my best to not overcomplicate it and probably fail. Just to remind people, there are two main forms of official crime statistic that is used. There are the FBI stats, and they are reported crime, and then there are the NCVS victim surveys, which are, they ask people if they have been a victim of crime in the last 18 months. Now, people generally pay more attention to the actual reported crime. That's a more objective measure, and there's way more detail on those stats. You can really crunch down where and when and under what circumstances the crimes happen. While it's true, many crimes aren't reported. Depending on the crime, it might be a 40 to 50% reportage rate. The reporting rate doesn't really change much from year to year. So you're at least comparing apples with apples when you compare the FBI crime rates, the reported crime. On the other hand, the victim surveys don't have any reporting issues at all. Everyone you talk to, either something's happening or something hasn't, they're not going to not report that something happened to them. But they ask people in the survey, they ask them over the last 18 months if they've been a victim of a crime. So if they ask them in February, say, of 2024, they're just asking them for the last 18 months, where does that go? Does that go into the 2023 figures, the 2024 figures, the 2022 figures? It's all very vague. And there's also memory issues involved there. How does the person define a crime? Do they remember it right as a crime? Do they remember whether it was actually within the last 18 months? Maybe it was in the last 16 months. Maybe it was the last 20 months. There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of vagary about the victim surveys, which is why people don't usually quote them. Although having said that, over the long run, both methods of stats will tell you basically the same thing. The trends will be the same for both of them. And it doesn't really matter which system you use in the long run, as long as you're honest, you don't cherry pick data, and you're aware of the pros and cons of your chosen system. So I don't want to proselytize about the system you use, but most people do use the FBI system. I use the FBI system. I like it. Now, the FBI stats recently underwent a bit of a revolution. They changed from a crappy old system to a really good new system with way more detail in the figures. But not every police department changed immediately. And the official changeover was in 2021. So what that means is if you use the FBI figures, never quote the 2021 figures. They're garbage. They're guesses. They only had about 65% of the country reporting. Their numbers are just not accurate. They eventually got revised to about 74% of the country reporting. That's still crap, though. New York didn't report crime in the 2021 figures. LA didn't report crime. Phoenix, Miami, San Jose, San Francisco, Raleigh, Omaha, Oakland, Pittsburgh, none of them reported crime. Chicago only reported a few months. Okay, you get the idea? They're crap stats. Total guesswork. But by 2022, the FBI had fixed the system. In 2022, there was 95% coverage. In 2023, so far, there's 94.3% coverage, but that will rise because there will be updates and they will add more data as time goes on. Republicans, though, who want to cast doubt on the FBI crime figures, you pay attention to what they say. You'll find they always talk about the 2021 figures as if they're the latest figures. Oh, well, in 2021, and they don't say they're special. They don't say it was a one-off. They don't say it wasn't indicative of any other year. They just act like that 2021 is just a random year they picked. And have a look. Not even New York and LA report their figures in 2021. See, the FBI figures are hopeless. That's how they trash the FBI figures, by focusing on 2021 and pretending that's the case for every year. And they do want to cast doubt on the FBI system, the Republicans, because the FBI system shows a gradual drop in violent crime over the last few years. And they don't want that because they want to look like Joe Biden's done very, very poorly with crime, even though he has nothing to do with crime anyway, to be honest. Even though it's been doing okay under him, that's not because of him. Republicans prefer the victim surveys as well, because the victim surveys had particularly low violent crime results in 2020 and 2021. Presumably that's COVID related, because in 2022, the numbers jumped right back up, and 2023, the numbers just returned to where they were in 2018 and 2019. By the way, all these years, the numbers were historically low, but if you compare them back to 10 years ago and 20 years ago, the numbers are way lower. But there is that dip in 2020 and 2021, which means Trump can then say, crime rose a lot from when I finished to now, because 2020 had that super low figure. So that's why he likes to use the victim surveys. It's not because of any theory reason. It just suits him. Of course, Trump never compares any other stat to 2020 because COVID made all his other stats worse. This is the only time he compares stats to 2020. He won't compare the unemployment rate to 2020. He won't compare the deficit to 2020, etc. He never mentions the sky-high murder rates in 2020 either. No. He just mentions all the other crimes, just not murder. Anyway, that's all the background. So hopefully you now understand the way crime stats work. What's the story this week or last week? Real Clear investigations, they found that, quote, when the FBI originally released the final crime data for 2022 in September 2023, it reported that the nation's violent crime rate fell by 2.1%. So the final crime data for 2022 reported in 2023, violent crime fell by 2.1%. This quickly became and remains a Democratic Party talking point to counter Donald Trump's claims of soaring crime. But the FBI has quietly revised those numbers, releasing new data that shows violent crime increased in 2022 by 4.5%. It didn't fall by 2.1%, it rose by 4.5%. The new data includes thousands more murders, rapes, robberies, and aggravated assaults. I've got numbers here, by the way. 1,699 more murders, 7,780 more rapes, 33,000 more robberies, 37,000 more aggravated assaults. I'll continue on with the quote. The Bureau, which has been at the centre of partisan storms, made no mention of these revisions in its September 2024 press release. RCI discovered the change through a cryptic reference on the FBI website that states the 2022 violent crime rate has been updated for inclusion in CIUS 2023. But there's no mention that the numbers increased. One only sees the change by downloading the FBI's new crime data and comparing it to the file released last year. Now, is that all true? Mostly, yes, it is. Is it misleading? Why, yes, it is. It's not one data point that changed. They're pretending that 2022 is the only thing that changed. It's not. There are two data points that changed. 2022 and, you guessed it, 2021, the shit year. The story is that the final 2022 figures went from violent crime falling by, like I said, 2.1%, to violent crime rising by 4.5%. So they say it's like a crime hike of 6.5%, or over 6%. First of all, no one ever said they were final figures when they said those were the final figures for 2022. That's not true. No one said that. Figures can always be updated, and they often are. But there is a huge oversimplification. 2022 didn't move by a huge amount. It certainly didn't move by 6%. If you look at the graph here, it will become clear. The red line you see there are the old figures. The blue line are the new figures. And you can see that essentially 2022 went up by about 2% from the red line to the blue line. So it would be essentially a flat line from 2021 if 2021 hadn't changed. But 2021's crime figures fell by a massive amount, about 4.5%, and that is what created the huge hike. It was the fact that 2021 went down by a lot that created that big rise. It should actually be a good news story that 2021 crime rates were revised way down. It means less crime. But it's not a good news story because remember, the 2021 figures are complete garbage. You can't trust them anyway. They're just hopeless. The bottom line is the changes in 2022, which have real figures, it's not like 2021, were much smaller than the original report made them appear. They went up by about 2%, not about 6%. The funny thing is conservatives are using those big changes in 2021 to act like there have been huge changes to the FBI figures when they've actually spent the last 3 years pointing out why we should never trust the 2021 figures. And they're right, we shouldn't trust those figures, so don't trust them. What this also means, though, is since the 2022 figures went up by just a little bit, that there is now a larger drop to 2023. If 2022 is higher, then that means there's a bigger drop-off to 2023. So violent crime in 2023, it was down by 1.6%, but now they've adjusted these new figures, it's actually dropped, violent crime's actually dropped by 3.5% instead of 1.6%. That should be good news. But none of the conservative articles are mentioning that bit. They're just focusing on the supposed rise in 2022 and going, wow, how much did crime go up in 2022? Let's focus on that. Oh, let's just ignore the fact that it went down by a lot in 2023. But how much did it go up in 2022? So these are obviously bad faith arguments. The bottom line about the changes, do the 2022 and 2023 revisions majorly alter our understanding of national crime trends? Let me quote Jeff Asher, who is the best crime stat expert in the biz. He wrote, "In my opinion, not at all. If our assessment of crime trends rightfully ignores 2021, then we can say that violent crime rose slightly in 2020, while murder rose at the fastest rate ever recorded that year. That was true in the 2020 release, it was true despite revisions in 2022, and it was true in 2023. Again, ignoring 2021 then, we can say that the FBI's 2023 estimates show a continued small decline in violent crime with a historically large decline in murder." Now the question is, can we trust any of these figures if they're just being adjusted all the time? Well, yes, I'll tell you how. There are more than two systems out there. There are two systems that are official, but there are also other crime indexes as well, and organised by other people. There's the Real-Time Crime Index, there's NORC's Live Crime Tracker, there's the CDC's crime figures, and there's the Gun Violence Archive, and all of them match the FBI's figures, apart from 2021, which should be ignored. Okay, so the data is good. What about the conspiracy, though? Why are they making changes now and sneaking them in just before it's too late, before the election? Well, why wouldn't they do it after the election if they're trying to hide them? But anyway, let's ignore that. Why are they making the changes now? Well, they always make late changes. This is not new. They've been doing this forever. Like, people are saying, oh, how could you add more murders? Surely there aren't new bodies. Well, no, but some departments report late and they report new figures, more figures than they reported before. For example, in 2022, they just added 625 murders, but they added 912 murders in the 2017 report. They added 844 murders in the 2020 report. They added 1,000 murders in the 2005 report. It happens. Every time there's new information, the FBI uses it. Where these particular figures came from, where these adjustments came from, why they did it now, I have no idea about any of those questions. The FBI, unfortunately, is not known for their transparency, and that is annoying. I think it's worth criticising them for, because that sucks. They should be informing the populace with transparent decisions. Okay, what about the secrecy? The fact that they didn't put out a press release? The fact that the media aren't reporting on this at all, apart from conservative media. Well, the media have no excuse, number one, okay? Because this, in my book, this is an important story. They should be reporting it. They should be reporting the truth, though, not the crap version which I read out before. What about the FBI, though? They never publicise the changes. Whether they're positive or negative changes, they never publicise it. Changes happen every year. They happen under Biden. They happen under Trump. They have happened at least since the 90s. There is no conspiracy. But they should put out a press release. I think they should put out a press release when there are changes. People care about this stuff. Like, publicise the truth, or at least publicise when you get closer to the truth. Especially if we're in the middle of an election campaign where crime rates are an issue. Of course they should have reported it. I think they should have released this in a publicity statement so people could know. I think I was really, really poor of them, I have to say. I'm not supporting that at all. So while I think there's no conspiracy, I think this is crappy practice from the FBI, and they should get a rap on the wrists about it. And by the way, that's also annoying that they don't publicise this stuff. You've got to become a super sleuth to find this shit. As a little aside, since 2023, we're already getting new figures. The total for violent crime for the 12 months ending in August 2024, 3.2% lower than the total for the 12 months ending in August 23. There's a 13% drop in murders reported by the CCJ for January through June 2024. Datalytics, based on a sample of 277 cities, reported an 18% drop in murders so far this year. And according to the FBI's numbers, homicides in 2023 were down 10% compared to 2020, which was Trump's last year in office. Let's compare that 2020 figure, just like Trump doesn't want us to do for murders. That's enough of that. Let's go to the next topic. I was going to cover this with Elle, but we ran out of time. Harris, I did some of this on Planet on Wednesday, but I want to do the lot. Harris has been misrepresented a lot recently, I feel, and I think it's indicative of something else. So let me explain. The whole campaign, Harris has been trying to avoid mistakes, right? I get the feeling that's what her personality is about. She doesn't like making errors. So she tries to make conservative decisions again, not take risks, which really is in itself an error. Like, if you don't take any risks, in the long run, you're going to be a lot worse off, as she's discovering now, as she tries to make up for the lack of interviews and press conferences she's held, and she has to turn up on Fox, and she has to do really tough interviews, and a lot of them in a short amount of time to make up for it, because she was so careful and cautious that she just didn't do really very many interviews at all. Then she got a terrible reputation for it, and now she's trying to make up for it. So that is a mistake, to be too cautious. But she has largely avoided gaffes. Most of the gaffes that exist involving Kamala Harris, to be fair, they're just misrepresenting her. Like when people took that grab from The View, where she said she couldn't think of any difference between her and Biden, and they ignored the fact that like a minute later she said she would have appointed a Republican to her cabinet. That was a difference. That's just not representing what she actually said if you just take the first part but don't mention the second part. But it's interesting that lately people have stopped trying to wait for gaffes from Harris and now trying to create them out of nowhere, even if she's really not done anything wrong. Let me explain what I mean. For example, this was a great bit of improv, I thought, from Harris the other day.
Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court. with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally. No, I think you meant to go to the smaller one down the street.
See, I thought that was genuinely funny. Great off-the-cuff reaction. But on right-wing Twitter, there was some argument over what exactly she was responding to. Some said she was responding to a person yelling, "Christ is King." Some said that she was responding to a person yelling, "Lies, lies." This is the same grab now with the volume turned up. See what you can hear.
And they did as he intended. Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally.
Okay, to be honest, I heard the word lies there, which doesn't mean she was responding to that, but at least that was louder than anything else. Fox obviously picked the option that suited their narrative, Fox News that is, and this is what they ran with. They actually cut in to the footage what they thought was what they wanted her to be responding to. Here, I'll just play it.
The intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade, and they did as he intended. Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally.
So for those listening, they cut in a completely different camera from a different area of the rally. But let's assume that they didn't chop up the timing. Let's assume it wasn't faked up. Let's assume that actually was in real time what happened on the other side of the rally. Harris was definitely looking in the direction of those Christ is King guys. She definitely was looking in their direction. But was she really telling them they were at the wrong rally simply because they were Christian? Because that's what Fox News was implying. I would argue that Fox was trying to create something out of nothing there. Because I think there is almost no chance that Harris would have heard those guys. Even the camera right near them that Fox used just then could barely pick up what they said. For those who aren't acquainted with audio techniques, that Fox News footage I played before where they cut in the Christ is King guy, that Christ is King was boosted way up, way up. I would never boost a PEP that much because you can hear the background interference and it just sounds awful. That was really boosted. Those guys were quiet, even for the camera that was right near them, let alone where Harris was standing miles away from them, at least further away than the camera was at the very least. But also, I don't think she would have heard them or understood them because many people were shouting things at the stage. That lies person, there was this hubbub everywhere. It's hard for me to explain to you guys if you haven't been on stage how hard it is to understand people when multiple people from 20 metres away or 10 metres away are talking at you. You hear lots of bits and pieces and you don't really assemble any of it in your head. Especially if there's background noise. It's really hard to make out anything distinct. It just all blurs into a mess for you. At least for me it does. And I think that's what almost certainly happened with Kamala Harris. She would have seen a disturbance. She saw them getting kicked out and she saw them yelling something. And then she told them they had the wrong rally because they were obviously making trouble. And you might say, well, you're just giving them the benefit of the doubt. You're just biased. Well, let me tell you my evidence. Firstly, in the Fox footage before, you can see they're being kicked out already when they are yelling at her. I'm going to play that clip again so you can see that they are on the march out of the building as they are yelling, "Christ is King." Have a look.
Christ is King. Jesus is Lord.
Secondly, this is what the Christian boys themselves said on Fox. They became these minor celebrities for a while there. They were acting like martyrs. The Fox were loving them, telling them they should run for office. Jesus. This is what they said, the actual boys themselves.
After she talked about overturning Roe v. Wade and Donald Trump, I yelled out to the crowd that abortion is the sacrament of Satan. And when I said that, I deeply do believe that as a Christian. And about 10 seconds go by, and that's when the video of my friend Grant and I proclaiming that Christ is Lord and Jesus is King.
Abortion is the sacrament of Satan. That they admit they were saying that. And that is a little more controversial than Jesus is Lord. So that explains why the crowd was already pushing them away. And because they said something loopy and crazy, and the crowd were getting rid of them because they thought, well, obviously these guys aren't Democrats. And that's when they yelled Christ is King. I reckon that would have been a disturbance that attracted Kamala Harris's attention. Them yelling abortion is the sacrament of Satan, she wouldn't have understood what they said, but she would have seen them getting thrown out. And importantly, remember, Harris was looking at them for a second or two before she spoke. I'll play the original clip again. Have a look. She's just looking at them for a few seconds before she speaks.
Oh, you guys are at the wrong rally.
That's at least 3 seconds she's looking at them before she speaks. What you can see there is that there is a significant amount of evidence, in my view, that Harris had no idea what was going on, but Fox News inferred a gaffe where it didn't exist. They made one up. And through, I think, unfair assumptions of what Kamala Harris was aware of. And then there was another one of the same kinds of things happening this week where people made up a gaffe for Kamala Harris. I couldn't believe it. There were two of them in the same week. Harris was speaking to students at a function, and she said that she was invested in the students' success. And then there was a Palestinian protester who popped up, and they said, when she said she was invested in the students' success, they said, and in genocide, right? Billions of dollars in genocide. Billions of dollars in genocide. And then Harris said, I'm speaking right now, which is what she likes to say when she's interrupted. And then I'll play the video, which continues from there. The video didn't start till that moment. You can see as the protester gets thrown out, what is said by both the protester and by Harris.
Right now, I know what you're speaking of. I want the ceasefire.
But what about the genocide?
I want the war to end.
What about the genocide?
And I respect your right to speak, but I am speaking right now.
Yeah!
So,
2,000 people dead. 19,000 children are dead. 19,000 children are dead.
So, listen, what he's talking about, it's real. And so that's not the subject that I came to discuss today, but it's real, and I respect his voice.
Okay, so to me, Harris isn't really listening to anything that dude is saying. She just wants him to go away, but she also wants to acknowledge that he's protesting about a real thing. Civilians are being killed in Gaza. That seems like a reasonable position for me, for her to take. It's not a gaffe, totally reasonable position, but some conservatives covered it as Harris validating the genocide charge because she said what he was protesting was real, and he was protesting about genocide. Now, I know many listeners would agree with the protester that what's going on in Gaza is a genocide. That's not what this is about. That's fine, you can think that. But I think the fact that Harris didn't critique him or argue with him, it doesn't mean that she agrees with him, does it? She's just trying to move on, that's all. She's trying to not dismiss him because she knows a large support part of her base agree with him. So she's just trying to move on. I don't like where this is going. I don't like this at all. This is new. This is not something that's happened in the past. People are starting to expect that politicians and public figures are all seeing and all knowing, and they're able to comprehend what you can see on your comfy lounge looking at a camera shot, a perfectly framed shot with a microphone. In the real world, people often don't understand what's being said, or they're confused, or they can't process it. It's just a mess. Tonight, for instance, on Planet America, our guest said, yesterday on Planet America, our guest said that 1,200 people died on 9/11. And we had some commenters who were surprised that I didn't correct our guest. You know why? I thought he might have meant that 1,200 American citizens died on 9/11. I didn't know the actual number of citizens who died on 9/11. I didn't have time to look it up, so I didn't correct him. But honestly, that's what I was thinking. But generally, I was just confused. I was half listening. I was half thinking about my next question. I was thinking about 50 different things. I was thinking about whether my shirt was crumpled up. I was thinking about my mic levels. I was thinking about a million different things. When you're performing, you do think about a million different things. I was thinking about whether the question that John asked a little bit before should be edited out. I was thinking about so many different things all at the same time. And of course, that's the case for Harris as well. In fact, it's worse for her because she isn't in a quiet studio like I was. She's under more pressure than I was. So have some tolerance for these candidates and some understanding of the situation they're in. They can't hear everything perfectly. And even if they could, they've got a lot of other stuff on their mind, okay? Just, if you're not seeing evidence that they understand what's going on, don't assume they do. I hate this invented gaffes garbage. Being a politician is not as easy as you think. That's why so many people suck at it. And I think that people have always had unrealistic expectations for our politicians, but I think now they're becoming even more unrealistic. So, I mean, I don't often express sympathy for politicians, but in this case, I will. Time misrepresentation. Okay, this will be the last thing I'll do, I think. Lockie's sitting there weighing me, staring at me like a lost puppy. I don't blame you. I'm not criticising you, Lockie. It's 7:51 a.m. I should shut the fuck up. But I will do. I'm going to do one more thing. And Lockie, you're not going to believe I'm going to do this. No. Because he's heard me whinge about this all night, which is I'm into reading the comments, okay? I believe in my audience. I care what they think. I don't think I have all the answers. I like to get different points of view from the audience, so I read the comments. I know everyone always says you should never read the comments. I read the comments. I'm proud of reading the comments. I don't think I'm better than the comments. But you know what? Sometimes I am better than the comments. Sometimes the comments are shit. and something that really gives me the heebie-jeebies is when I read in the comments a whole bunch of, oh, you're a Trump apologist, when I'm trying to just be fair. I'm not trying to be neutral. I'm not trying to be, oh, ABC takes one side, then the other side. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to work out what I think is a fair interpretation, because I think that often people aren't fair. I think that often there's more than one interpretation. I don't even know what I think. I'm working out for myself. I'm postulating, going, well, how about this? And then I put it to John and go, what do you think about that? And I'll listen to what he says, and then sometimes I go, yeah, I agree with you, like I did tonight. On the latest Planet America, we're talking about the Jeffrey Goldberg article about Trump, and the Trump saying he wouldn't pay 60 grand to bury a fucking Mexican, I think the quote was. I put forth the case, which I thought was a reasonable case of why maybe that story wasn't credible. I listened to John put forth his point of view about why he thought it was credible. And I made up my mind that I agreed with John. And I explained, I said to people at home, I said, you can agree with me or you can disagree with me, but you've got all the facts now. You make up your own mind. I like that's how it should be. I'm not preaching the gospel here. I'm just trying to give you the benefit of me doing a lot more reading than you do. Hopefully for the sake of you having a life. I hope you don't read like I read. That's me. That's my job. I read for you, and then I give you the benefit of that reading, and then you make up your own mind about stuff. I don't have to shove it down your throat. That's the way I think is the best way to present news on TV, and analysis. But it really gives me a shits when I'm just trying to be fair here and accurate and precise. Yes, maybe I do move into splitting hairs. I can totally accept that I probably do. But it's not biased towards the person I'm trying to be fair to. If I'm trying to bend over backwards to be fair to Trump because I think other people are not being fair to Trump. It's not apologising for him. It's just trying to be accurate. Anyway, I've whinged about this for a while. I'm actually going to revisit what I said on Planet America today about the enemy within. And I got so much crap about that in the comments. I'm going to go in even deeper now. You guys can just skip this if you want. This is going to be the last bit of the podcast. But I think that there is a reasonable case to be made. I'm not 100% sure of this. It's still something I'm still working out. But I think there's a reasonable chance to be a reasonable case to be made that Trump is being misrepresented, just like I thought Harris was being misrepresented in those last few cases. Okay, let's get into it. I thought I was being quite critical of Trump with an enemy within, to be honest. In my view, he absolutely has now made clear that if there are lively protests of any kind perhaps, on election day, he is more than happy to set the National Guard on them. Or in fact, the military on them, which is not only illegal, but it's an authoritarian nightmare. It's how you end the right to protest. That is my position. I don't think it's a gentle position. I think that Trump disqualifies himself with that quote. I think that's awful, and John Kelly agrees with me, which is why he came forward. Me and John Kelly were on the same page on this one. I don't think you need to exaggerate that. I think that's bad enough. That's my view. So I think I'm being critical. But other people say that I should be taking the critique way further than that. Some people are saying, most people, in fact, almost everyone is saying that Trump wants to set the military on Adam Schiff or Nancy Pelosi or even the panel of The View. Have a look at this.
Yeah, let me say something. I was watching interviews with MAGA supporters. They do not believe that he will do what he says he's going to do. That is what we're up against. Mm-hmm. So if you say he's going to be dictator on day one, he wants to punish with the Air Forces, whatever we have, the armed forces, he wants to punish people who disagree with him, like people like us. I
put to you that that Trump doesn't want to set the Air Force or the Army or anyone on the panel of The View. And Kamala Harris, she's taken it further again, really.
In just the past week, Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify, in his mind, as the enemy within.
So Kamala Harris has made it very clear that she thinks Trump is talking about setting the military on anyone who disagrees with him at all. They don't even have to have appeared on The View. But I want to play the full context of the original Enemy Within clip, which I played on Play America, but there's more coming. So this is the full context of the original clip.
And a lot from South America.
There was an Afghan refugee charged with plotting a U.S. Election Day massacre.
Nothing surprises me.
What about that, though? Are you expecting chaos on Election Day?
No, I don't think so. Not from the side that votes for Trump.
But I'm just wondering if these outside agitators will start up on Election Day. Let's say you win. I mean, let's remember, you've got 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
You have people on the terrorist watch list, 350 in the last couple of years. You got, like you said, 13,000 murderers and 15,000 rapists.
Right.
What are you expecting? Joe Biden said he doesn't think it's going to be a peaceful Election Day.
Well, he doesn't have any idea what's happening in all fairness. He spends most of his day sleeping. I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within, not even the people that have come in and destroying our country. By the way, totally destroying our country. The towns, the villages, they're being inundated. But I don't think they're the problem in terms of Election Day. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics. And I think they're and it should be very easily handled by, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military.
Okay, so I played that on Planet America. I said on Planet America, I thought that showed that Trump clearly was referring to people creating disturbances on Election Day. He kept saying Election Day over and over again. Some people quoted him out of context, even after I played the grab where they cut off bits and pieces within the grab. Just look at the whole grab. It is very clear he's talking about Election Day, in my view, and about protesters of some kind on Election Day. But you know what? A lot of people said, well, what about the Adam Schiff bit? Let's play the Adam Schiff bit as well. This is the next time he mentioned the enemy within. This was not, by the way, straight after the first time. They were separated by 35 minutes on the TV show. Now, I don't know if the second quote was in the original interview was much closer together and they just separated them when they aired them on the TV show. I've got no idea. So they might have been recorded very, very quickly after each other, or maybe they were miles apart in the interview and they were edited in a way that made it seem like they could be close together. I don't know. All I know is this was a different grab from a different time. That's all I know. They played it later on in the show. This is Trump talking about the next time. This is the next time he mentioned the enemy within. And this is the full context of that.
How are you going to guard against the bureaucrats undermining you?
Well, they're going to undermine.
Term?
Well, I always say, so we have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries, because if you have a smart president, he can handle them pretty easily. I got along great with all. I handled them. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Shifty Schiff. Think of this guy's going to be a senator. He's running against a guy that doesn't understand politics at all, Garvey, but he was a good baseball player. But he doesn't understand politics at all. Adam Shifty Schiff, who's a total sleazebag, is going to become a senator. But I call him the enemy from within. When you look at the danger he put our country in, potentially with Russia, with a phony made-up deal that he made up with Hillary and some bad people, that started off as an excuse for why she lost an election that a lot of people thought she should have won, because the polls indicated she might win, and then she got beaten everywhere, virtually. When you look at that, and then they said, it was Russia. They used it as an excuse. And then the fake news picked it up. And while you're on this, let's talk about the single greatest scandal, in my opinion, in broadcast history. 60 Minutes and CBS interviewed Kamala, and she's incompetent. She gave them the dumbest answer anyone's ever heard.
Now, I think that might be the dumbest answer anyone has ever heard. She's asking about bureaucrats. He's going on this long rant. He ended up going on a little bit further about 60 Minutes and how CBS should have their license revoked. I don't think he's imagining sending the military to 60 Minutes. I'm sorry. I don't think he's imagining sending the military to Adam Schiff. I think in that full context, it's pretty clear that he's forgotten about the military now, and he's just reaching for phrases. He thinks the phrase, the enemy from within, sounds kind of cool, and so he just throws it around for anyone he's opposed to. I think that's what's going on there. I really don't think that in that answer there, he was thinking about the military at all. It seems to me that he just uses the phrase, the enemy within, whenever he wants to describe anyone he doesn't like. In the first answer, he was talking about how he didn't like the protesters, and he'd use the military on them if he needed to. Not even if he needed to necessarily. He was open to using the military on them. In the second answer, he was talking about other people he didn't like. They're the enemy from within, and he's saying how CBS should have their license revoked and someone should stop Adam Schiff. I just don't see the relation or the military thing. The military thing, I think, was limited to the first answer, in my view. And that's bad enough. Then Trump was asked about this on the Women's Town Hall, the Fox Women's Town Hall, with an absolutely nonsensical question. See if you can make sense of this question. But then they played his Adam Schiff enemy from within grab, and they asked him about it. I'm going to play all that as well. Have a look.
You know, we're talking about safety. We're talking about crime. Right now, Vice President Kamala Harris is playing some comments that you made to Maria Bartiromo on Sunday. I don't know if you've seen this.
No.
And they're using your words to say that you are not for crime and keeping particularly women safe in ads. I want to take a look at what you said and just tell me. Let's watch it.
If we have to.
Yeah.
We have Adam Schiff. I call him the enemy from within.
Mr. President, Kamala Harris has said you sounded unhinged and unchecked power is in our future. What do you say about that?
I thought it was a nice presentation. I wasn't unhinged. You know what they are? They're a party of sound bites. Somebody asked me, can they be brought together? You know, I never thought, really, I wasn't thinking like they could, because they're very, very different. And it is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. I use a guy like Adam Schiff because they made up the Russia hoax. It took 2 years to solve the problem. Absolutely nothing was done wrong, et cetera, et cetera. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick and they're so evil. If they would spend their time trying to make America great again, it would be so easy to make this country great. But when I heard about that, they were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. But think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So it seems to me they had that weird question. They played his grab where he said Adam Schiff was the enemy from within, and they asked him what he meant. And then he explained what he meant about calling Adam Schiff the enemy from within, which was he was whinging about Democrats. And he mentioned Nancy Pelosi as well. He wasn't talking about the military in that answer at all. None of this stuff has anything to do with calling in the military except for that first grab. Now, that's in my view. You may disagree. I can't read his mind. He talks shit. It's very hard. But I'm doing my best to try to read his mind, and that's my best. You can disagree. It's not me being an apologist for Trump that we disagree. We just have different interpretations of what the hell is going on in his diseased mind, okay? I am not a fan of his at all. Just trying to be professional. By the way, for what it's worth, Mike Johnson was asked about this on CNN, and I reckon he's trying to say what I think, and it didn't go too well. Here we go.
One of the first things you did when you joined Congress was to create the Honor and Civility Caucus. Does wanting to use the military against political opponents, would that pass muster with the Civility Caucus?
That's not... Jake, you know that's not what he's talking about there. What he's talking about is marauding gangs of dangerous, violent people who are destroying public property
he talked about Adam
and
Schiff
threatening
and the Pelosi's.
other American citizens.
He's not talking. I mean, Governor Youngkin tried this with me too. That's not. He was very clear. Let me play, because he was asked about this later on, because Fox always likes to give Donald Trump an opportunity to clean it up, and he always says, "No, I said what I meant." Here's what he said when asked about it the next day.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. I use a guy like Adam Schiff because they made up the Russia hoax. It took 2 years to solve the problem. Absolutely nothing was done wrong, et cetera, et cetera. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick. And they're so evil.
That's what he's talking about, using the U.S. military against, not marauding gangs of Venezuelan.
Wait a minute.
Adam
Hold on.
Schiff, Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul. So let me just say, if a Democratic presidential candidate said that you and your wife were evil and that the military should be used against you, I would say that's disgusting.
Well, thank you. And some have said that about us because they don't like my politics. I did not hear President Trump in that clip say he's going to sick the military on Adam Schiff. That's not what he's saying. You got two different clips in two different contexts. He must be extinguished.
He's literally talking about
this
taking
stuff
the
is over the
military
top.
and
You know
using it against Democrats. I mean, he's literally talking.
No, he's not. No,
yes, he is.
No, he's not, Jake. No, he's not. No, he's talking about using the National Guard and the military to keep the peace in our streets. In the summer of 2020, that my Democrat colleagues call the summer of love, it was crazy. It was mayhem.
Do you see why I'm doing this? Jake Tapper is conflating the military attack clip with the clip of Trump whinging about politicians. And he's saying, he said the enemy within about these politicians. He wants to attack them with the military. I don't think they're the same thing. And this is actually important. The reason I'm being so pedantic about this is one of the main arguments being used in the last few weeks as election campaign. This could be the number one point of the peak of this election campaign. I don't think it's real. I think it's fake. I don't think... I'm not saying that by the way, that I'm not saying Kamala Harris is distorting him on purpose. I'm not saying that people are misrepresenting him out of mischief or for partisan reasons. Maybe they genuinely believe that he does mean the military should be called in for all of these people in all of these circumstances. Maybe they genuinely think that, and I just disagree with them. I just don't think what they think is accurate. And you can make up your own mind, whether you're on my side or you're on the side of everyone else in the world, including John, including all our commenters, including it seems everyone except for Mike Johnson. If I could have an ally, it wouldn't be Mike Johnson. How do I get Mike Johnson? So that's where we're at. I don't think it's being a Trump apologist, even though now when I say that, and I say that Mike Johnson's my ally, it sounds like I'm being a Trump apologist. Now, how many times people say I am, I think I am stubbornly clinging to what I believe is the truth, even though I'm copping endless crap for it. Is not easy, but I am not going to give up, damn it, because I'm the kind of person who makes 4-hour podcasts. So, anyway, I'm now not going to go on about it anymore. I've run out of clips to play. Most of you have gone away. For those who have remained, thank you for sticking it out. And I'll be interested if anyone agrees with me at all. I will assume that you all disagree with me, okay? because most people do. But I just like to know I'm not crazy. That's all. I just like to know that I don't need to check myself into an asylum. That's all I want to know. Thank you. Well, in this regard, don't tell me if I need to be checked into asylum for other reasons, okay? All right, we've already covered that earlier on this podcast about the Chaz rule from when I was at uni. We don't need to go over that again. Folks, thank you so much. I don't know if we made 4 hours, but I bet we're damn close. The next two, there's going to be 2 more podcasts before the election. There's going to be one on Wednesday, I think, with Bill Wyman. And then there's going to be one with Dave on Friday. I think that will be enough. Both of them are going to be big because I've got a lot to squeeze in. I still haven't got to deportations, which I think is one of the major stories this election and been completely ignored. So I really, really want to cover that. And I haven't gone to their taxes either, which I want to get into as well. So much more to talk about as well. So anyway, I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thanks for sticking it out for the record-breaking PEP. Until then, stay peppy.